without further ado, let us begin. The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. Chapter 1. Marseille. Arrival. On February the 24th, 1815, the lookout at Notre-Dame de la Garde signalled the arrival of the three-master Pharaon, coming from Smyrna, Trieste and Naples. As usual, a coastal pilot immediately left the port, sailed hard by the Château d'If, and boarded the ship between the Cap de Morjou and the island of Riou. At once, as was also customary, the terrace of Fort Saint-Jean was thronged with onlookers, because the arrival of a ship is always a great event in Marseille, particularly when the vessel, like Pharaon, has been built, fitted out, and laded in the shipyards of the old port, and belongs to an owner from the town. Meanwhile the ship was drawing near, and had successfully negotiated the narrows created by some volcanic upheaval between the islands of Casarène and Jars. It had rounded Pommeille, and was proceeding under its three topsails, its outer jib and its spanker, but so slowly and with such melancholy progress that the bystanders, instinctively sensing some misfortune, wondered what accident could have occurred on board. Nevertheless, those who were experts in nautical matters acknowledged that, if there had been such an accident, it could not have affected the vessel itself, for its progress gave every indication of a ship under perfect control. The anchor was ready to drop, and the bowsprit shrouds loosed. Next to the pilot, who was preparing to guide the Pharaon through the narrow entrance to the port of Marseille, stood a young man, alert and sharp-eyed, supervising every movement of the ship and repeating each of the pilot's commands. One of the spectators on the terrace of Fort Saint-Jean had been particularly affected by the vague sense of unease that hovered among them, so much so that he could not wait for the vessel to come to land. He leapt into a small boat and ordered it to be rowed out to the Pharaon, coming alongside opposite the cove of La Réserve. When he saw the man approaching, the young sailor left his place beside the pilot, and, hat in hand, came and leant on the bulwarks of the ship. He was a young man of between 18 and 20, tall, slim, with fine dark eyes and ebony black hair. His whole demeanour possessed the calm and resolve peculiar to men who have been accustomed from childhood to wrestle with danger. "Ah, it's you, Dante!" the man in the boat cried. "What has happened, and why is this air of dejection about all on board?" "A great misfortune, Monsieur Morel," the young man replied. "A great misfortune, especially for me. While off Civitavecchia, we lost our good Captain Leclerc." "And the cargo?" the ship owner asked brusquely. "It has come safe to port, Monsieur Morel, and I think you will be content on that score. But poor Captain Leclerc—" "What happened to him, then?" the ship owner asked, visibly relieved. "So what happened to the good captain?" "He is dead." "Lost overboard?" "No, monsieur. He died of an apoplectic fever, in terrible agony." Then, turning back to his crew, he said, "Look lively there! Every man to his station to drop anchor!" The crew obeyed. As one man, the 8 or 10 sailors of which it was composed leapt, some to the sheets, others to the braces, others to the halyards, others to the jib, and still others to the brails. The young sailor glanced casually at the start of this operation, and, seeing that his orders were being carried out, prepared to resume the conversation. "But how did this misfortune occur?" the ship-owner continued, picking it up where the young man had left off. "By heaven, monsieur, in the most unexpected way imaginable. After a long conversation with the commander of the port, Captain Leclerc left Naples in a state of great agitation. 24 hours later he was seized with fever, and 3 days after that he was dead. We gave him the customary funeral, and he now rests, decently wrapped in a hammock, with a 36-pound cannonball at his feet and another at his head, off the island of Giglio. We've brought his medal and his sword back for his widow." "Much good it did him," the young man continued, with a melancholy smile, "to fight the war against the English for 10 years, only to die at last, like anyone else, in his bed." "Damn it, Monsieur Edmond, what do you expect?" said the ship-owner, who appeared to be finding more and more to console him in his grief. "We are all mortal. The old must give way to the young, or else there would be no progress or promotion. As long as you can assure me that the cargo—" "All is well with it, Monsieur Morel, I guarantee you. If you take my advice, you will not discount this trip for a profit of 25,000 francs. Then, as they had just sailed past the round tower, the young sailor cried, "Furl the topmast sails, the jib and the spanker. Look lively." The order was obeyed with almost as much dispatch as on a man-of-war. "Let go and brail all!" At this last command, all the sails were lowered and the progress of the ship became almost imperceptible, driven only by the impetus of its forward motion. "And now, if you would like to come aboard, Monsieur Morel," Dantès said, observing the owner's impatience. "I see your supercargo, Monsieur Danglars, coming out of his cabin. He will give you all the information that you desire. As for me, I must see to the mooring and put the ship in mourning." The owner did not need asking twice. He grasped hold of a line that Dantès threw to him, and, with an agility that would have done credit to a seaman, climbed the rungs nailed to the bulging side of the ship, while Dantès went back to his post and left the conversation to the man he had introduced as Danglars. The latter was indeed emerging from his cabin and coming across to the shipowner. This new arrival was a man 25 to 26 years old, somewhat sombre in appearance, obsequious towards his superiors and insolent to his subordinates. Hence, even apart from the label of supercargo, which always in itself causes aversion among sailors, he was generally as much disliked by the crew as Dantès was loved by them. "Well, Monsieur Morel," said Danglars, "you have heard the bad news, I suppose?" Yes, poor Captain Leclerc. He was a fine and upright man." "And above all an excellent sailor, weathered between the sea and the heavens, as was proper in a man responsible for looking after the interests of so important a firm as Morel and Son," Danglars replied. "Even so," the shipowner replied, watching Dantès whilst he searched for his mooring. "Even so, I think one need not be a seaman of such long experience as you say, Danglars, to know the business. There is our friend Edmund going about his. It seems to me like a man who has no need to ask advice of anybody." "Indeed," said Danglars, casting a sidelong glance at Dantès with a flash of hatred in his eyes. "Yes, indeed, he is young and full of self-confidence. The captain was hardly dead before he had taken command without asking anyone, and made us lose a day and a half on the island of Elba instead of returning directly to Marseille." "As far as taking command of the ship is concerned," said the owner, "that was his duty as first mate. As for losing a day and a half at Elba, he was in the wrong, unless there was some damage to the ship that needed repairing. The ship was in as good shape as I am, and as good as I hope you are, Monsieur Morel. That day and a half was lost on a whim, for nothing other than the pleasure of going ashore." "Dantès," the owner said, turning towards the young man, "would you come here?" "Your pardon, monsieur," Dantès said. "I shall be with you in an instant." Then to the crew he called, "Drop anchor." The anchor was immediately lowered, and the chain ran out noisily. Dantès stayed at his post, even though the pilot was there, until the last operation had been carried out, then ordered, "Lower the pennant and the flag to half-mast. Unbrace the yards." "You see," Danglars said, "I do believe he thinks himself captain already." "So he is, in effect," said the owner. "Yes, apart from your signature and that of your partner, Monsieur Morel." "By gad, why shouldn't we leave him in the job?" said the owner. "He is young, I grant you, but he seems made for it, and very experienced in his work." A cloud passed across Danglars' brow. "Excuse me, Monsieur Morel," Dantès said as he came over. "Now that the ship is moored, I am entirely at your disposal. I think you called me?" Danglars took a step back. "I wanted to ask you why you stopped on the island of Elba." I don't know, monsieur. It was to carry out a last order from Captain Leclerc, who gave me on his deathbed a packet for Marshal Bertrand. Did you see him, Edmund? Whom? The Grand Marshal? Yes. Morel looked about him and drew Dantès aside. And how is the Emperor? He asked earnestly. He is well, as far as I can judge by my own eyes. So you saw the Emperor too, did you? He came to visit the Marshal while I was there. And did you speak to him? It was he, monsieur, who spoke to me, Dantès said, smiling. And what did he say? He asked me about the ship, the time of its departure for Marseille, the route it had taken, and the cargo we were carrying. I think that, had it been empty and I the master of it, he intended to buy it, but I told him that I was only the first mate, and that the ship belonged to the firm of Morel and Son. Ah, yes, he said, I know them. The Morels have been ship-owners from father to son, and there was Morel who served in the same regiment as I did, when I was garrisoned at Valence. By heaven, that's a fact, the ship-owner cried with delight. It was Policar Morel, my uncle, who later made captain. Dantès, tell my uncle that the Emperor remembered him, and you will bring tears to the old trooper's eyes. Come now, he went on, putting a friendly arm across the young man's shoulders. You did well to follow Captain Leclerc's instructions and stop on Elba, even though, if it were known that you gave a packet to the Marshal and spoke to the Emperor, you might be compromised. How could it compromise me, monsieur? Said Dantès. I don't even know what I was carrying, and the Emperor only asked me the same questions that he would have put to anyone else. But please excuse me, he continued. The health authorities and the customs are coming on board. With your permission? Of course, my dear Dantès. Carry on. The young man went off, and, as he did so, Danglars returned. So, he asked, it appears that he gave you good reason for stopping off at Porto Ferrajo. Excellent reason, my dear Danglars. I am pleased to hear it, the other replied. It is always distressing to see a comrade fail in his duty. Dantès did his duty, the ship-owner answered, and there is no more to be said. It was Captain Leclerc who ordered him to put into port. Speaking of Captain Leclerc, did he not give you a letter from him? Who? Dantès? Not to me. Was there one? I believe that, apart from the packet, Captain Leclerc entrusted him with a letter. Which packet are you referring to, Danglars? The same that Dantès delivered when we stopped at Porto Ferrajo. And how did you know that he had a packet to deliver at Porto Ferrajo? Danglars blushed. I was passing by the door of the captain's cabin, which was partly open, and I saw him handing the packet in a letter to Dantès. He did not mention it, said the owner, but if he has such a letter, he will give it to me. Danglars thought for a moment. In that case, Monsieur Morel, he said, I beg you to say nothing about it to Dantès. I must have been mistaken. At that moment the young man came back, and Danglars left them. Now, my dear Dantès, are you free? The owner asked. Yes, monsieur. It did not take long. No, I gave the customs a list of our cargo. As for the port authorities, they sent a man with the coastal pilot, and I handed our papers over to him. So you have nothing more to do here? Dantès cast a rapid glance about him. No, everything is in order, he said. Then you can come and take dinner with us. Please, Monsieur Morel, I beg you to excuse me, but the first thing I must do is visit my father. Nonetheless, I am most grateful for the honour you do me. That's proper, Dantès, very proper. I know you are a good son. And, Dantès asked somewhat hesitantly, as far as you know, he's in good health, my father? I do believe so, my dear Edmund, though I have not seen him. Yes, he stays shut up in his little room, which at least proves that he lacked nothing while you were away. Dantès smiled. My father is a proud man, monsieur, and even if he were short of everything, I doubt if he would have asked for help from anyone in the world except God. Now, when you have done that, we can count on your company. I must beg you once more to excuse me, Monsieur Morel, but after that first visit, there is another that is no less important to me. Ah, Dantes, that's true. I was forgetting that there is someone in Le Catalan who must be expecting you with no less impatience than your father, the lovely Mercedes. Dantes smiled. "Ha, said the owner. "Now I understand why she came 3 times to ask me for news of the Pharaon. Dash it, Edmund, you're a lucky fellow to have such a pretty mistress." "She is not my mistress, monsieur," the young sailor said gravely. "She is my fiancée." "It sometimes amounts to the same thing," the owner said with a chuckle. "Not for us, monsieur," Dantes replied. Come, my dear Edmund," the other replied. "Don't let me detain you. You have looked after my business well enough for me to give you every opportunity to look after your own. Do you need any money?" "No, monsieur. I have all my salary from the trip. That is nearly 3 months' pay." "You manage your affairs well, my boy." "You might add that my father is a poor man, Monsieur Morel." "Yes, indeed, I know you are a good son to him. So, go and see your father. I, too, have a son, and I should bear a grudge against the man who kept him away from me after a 3-month voyage." "May I take my leave, then?" the young man said with a bow. "Yes, if you have nothing more to say to me." "No." "When Captain Leclerc was dying, he did not give you a letter for me?" "It would have been impossible for him to write one, monsieur. But that reminds me, I wanted to ask you for a fortnight's leave." "To get married?" "Firstly, then to go to Paris." "Very well. Have as much time as you want, Dantes. It will take us a good 6 weeks to unload the vessel, and we shall hardly be ready to put to sea again within 3 months. In 3 months' time, however, you must be there. The Pharaon," the ship-owner continued, putting a hand across the young sailor's shoulders, "cannot set sail without its captain." "Without its captain?" Dantes cried, his eyes lighting up with joy. "Be very careful what you are saying, monsieur, because you have just touched on the most secret of my heart's desires. Can it be that you intend to appoint me captain of the Pharaon?" "If it was up to me alone, I should grasp your hand, my dear Dantes, and say to you the matter is settled. But I have a partner, and you know the Italian proverb, chi hap compagno ha padrone. But at least we are halfway there, since you already have one of the 2 votes you need. Leave it to me to get you the other, and I shall do my best." "Oh, Monsieur Morel!" the young sailor cried, with tears in his eyes, grasping the ship-owner's hands. "Monsieur Morel, I thank you, on behalf of my father and of Mercedes." "Fine, Edmund, fine. There is a God in heaven who looks after honest folk. Go and see your father, go and see Mercedes, then when that's done, come and see me." "But don't you want me to accompany you back to land?" No, thank you. I shall stay here to settle my accounts with Danglars. Were you happy with him during the voyage?" "It depends on what you understand by that question, monsieur. If you mean as a good companion, no, because I think that he has not liked me since the day when I had the folly, after a trifling dispute between us, to suggest that we should stop for 10 minutes on the Isle of Monte Cristo to settle the matter. It was wrong of me to propose that, and he was right to refuse. If you are asking me about him as a supercargo, I think there is nothing to say, and that you will be satisfied with the manner in which his duties have been carried out." "Come now, Dantes," the ship-owner asked. "If you were captain of the Pharaon, would you be pleased to keep Danglars?" "Whether as captain or as first mate, Monsieur Morel," Dantes replied, "I shall always have the highest regard for those who enjoy the confidence of my owners." Well, Dantes, you are clearly a fine lad in every respect. Let me detain you no longer, for I can see that you are on tenterhooks." "I may take my leave?" asked Dantes. "Go on, I'm telling you." "Will you permit me to use your boat?" "Take it." "Au revoir, Monsieur Morel, and thank you 1,000 times." "Au revoir, dear Edmund, and good luck." The young sailor leapt into the boat, seated himself in the stern and gave the order to row across to the Cambière. 2 sailors immediately bent over their oars, and the vessel proceeded as fast as it could among the 1,000 small boats that obstruct the sort of narrow alleyway leading between 2 lines of ships from the harbour entrance to the Quai d'Orléans. The ship-owner looked after him, smiling, until the boat touched land and he saw him leap onto the cobbled quay, where he was instantly lost in the variegated crowd that, from 5 in the morning until 9 in the evening, throngs the famous street known as La Cambière. The modern inhabitants of this old Phocian colony are so proud of it that they proclaim, with all the seriousness in the world, in that accent which gives such savour to everything they say, "If Paris had the Cambière, Paris would be a little Marseille." Turning, the ship-owner saw Danglars standing behind him, apparently awaiting orders, but in reality, like him, watching the young sailor's departure. Yet there were 2 very different expressions in these 2 pairs of eyes following the one man. Chapter 2. Father and Son. We shall leave Danglars, gripped by the demon of hatred, trying to poison the shipowner's ear with some malicious libel against his comrade, and follow Dantès, who, after walking along the Cambière, took the Rue de Nouaille, entered a small house on the left side of the Allée des Mélins, and hastened up the 4 flights of a dark stairway. There, holding the banister with one hand, while the other repressed the beating of his heart, he stopped before a half-open door through which he could see to the back of a small room. In this room lived Dantès' father. News of the arrival of the Pharaon had not yet reached the old man, who was standing on a chair, engaged with trembling hands in pinning up some nasturtiums and clematis that climbed across the trellis outside his window. Suddenly he felt himself grasped around the waist, and a well-known voice exclaimed behind him, "Father, my dear father!" The old man cried out and turned around, then, seeing his son, fell into his arms, pale and trembling. "What is it, father?" the young man exclaimed with concern. "Are you unwell?" "No, no, dear Edmund, my son, my child. No, but I was not expecting you, and the joy, the shock of seeing you like this unexpectedly. Oh, heavens, it is too much for me." "Now then, father, calm yourself. I am really here. They always say that joy cannot harm you, which is why I came in without warning. Come now, smile. Don't look at me like that, with those wild eyes. I am back, and there is happiness in store for us." "I'm pleased to hear it, my boy," the old man continued. "But what happiness? Are you going to stay with me from now on? Come, tell me about your good fortune." "God forgive me," the young man said, "for rejoicing at good fortune which has brought grief to the family of another. But God knows I never wished for it. It has happened, and I do not have the heart to grieve at it. Our good Captain Leclerc is dead, father, and it seems likely that, thanks to Monsieur Morel's support, I shall have his command. Do you understand, father? A captain at 20, with a salary of 100 louis and a share in the profits. Isn't that better than a poor sailor like myself could expect?" "Yes, my son, yes," said the old man. "This is indeed a stroke of luck." "So I want you to have a little house with the first money I earn, and a garden to grow your clematis, your nasturtiums, and your honeysuckle. But what's wrong, father? You look ill." "An instant, don't worry. It is nothing." And, his strength failing him, he leant back. "Father," cried the young man, "come, have a glass of wine. It will revive you. Where do you keep your wine?" No, thank you. Don't bother to look for it. There is no need," he replied, trying to restrain his son. "Yes, indeed there is, father. Show me it." He opened 1 or 2 cupboards. "It is a waste of time," the old man said. "There is no wine left." "What? No wine?" Dantès said, paling in turn as he looked from the old man's sunken and livid cheeks to the empty cupboards. "What? You have no wine left? Have you been short of money, father?" "I am short of nothing now that you are here," said the old man. But I left you 200 francs, Dantes stammered, wiping the sweat from his brow. 2 months ago, as I was leaving. Yes, Edmund, so you did. But when you left, you forgot a small debt to my neighbour, Caderousse. He reminded me of it and said that if I did not settle it on your behalf, he would go and reclaim it from Monsieur Morel. So, you understand, I was afraid that it might do you some harm. And I paid it. But, Dantes exclaimed, I owed Caderousse 140 francs. Yes, the old man mumbled. And you paid them out of the 200 francs that I left you? His father nodded. Which means that you lived for 3 months on 60 francs? The young man exclaimed. You know how small my needs are. Oh, heaven forgive me, Edmund cried, falling on his knees in front of the old man. What are you doing? You have broken my heart. Pah! You are here, the old man said with a smile. All is forgotten, because all is well. Yes, here I am, said the young man. Here I am with a fine future and a little money. Here, father, he said, take it and send out for something immediately. He emptied the contents of his pockets on the table, a dozen gold coins, 5 or 6 5-franc pieces, and some small change. Old Dantes's face lit up. Whose is that? He asked. Mine, thine, ours, of course. Take it, buy some food and enjoy yourself. There will be more tomorrow. Gently, the old man said, smiling. If you don't mind, I shall go easy on your money. If people see me buying too many things at once, they will think that I had to wait for you to come back before I went shopping. Do as you think best. But first of all, father, get yourself a housemaid. I don't want you to live on your own from now on. I have some contraband coffee and some excellent tobacco in a little chest in the hold. You will have it tomorrow. But hush! Someone is coming. That will be Caderousse, who has learned of your arrival and is no doubt coming to welcome you back. There's a fellow who says one thing and thinks another, Edmund muttered. No matter. He is a neighbour who has helped us in the past, so let him come in. Just as Edmund finished saying this under his breath, the black-bearded head of Caderousse appeared on the landing, framed in the outer door. A man of 25 or 26 years of age, he was holding a piece of cloth which, being a tailor, he was about to fashion into the lining of a jacket. "You're back again, then, Edmund," he said with a thick Marseille accent and a broad smile, revealing teeth as white as ivory. "As you can see, neighbour, and entirely at your service," Dantes replied, this polite formula barely disguising his coldness towards the man. Thank you. Fortunately, I need nothing. In fact, it is sometimes others who need me." Dantes bridled. "I am not saying that for you, my boy. I lent you money and you returned it. That's how things are done between good neighbours, and we're quits." "We are never quits towards those who have done us a favour," said Dantes. "Even when one ceases to owe them money, one owes them gratitude." "There is no sense in speaking of that. What's past is past. Let's talk about your happy return, young man. I just happened to go down to the harbour to fetch some brown cloth when I met our friend Danglars." "You're in Marseille?" I exclaimed. "Yes, as you see. I thought you were in Smyrna." "It could well be, because I've just come back from there." "And where is young Edmund, then?" "At his father's, I suppose, Danglars told me. So I came at once," Caderousse concluded, "to have the pleasure of shaking the hand of a friend." "Dear Caderousse," the old man said, "he is so fond of us." "Indeed I am, and I hold you all in the greatest esteem, since honest people are so rare. But it seems you have come into money, my boy," the tailor went on, glancing at the handful of gold and silver that Dantes had emptied onto the table. The young man observed a flash of greed light up his neighbour's dark eyes. "Heavens, no," he said casually. "That money is not mine. I was just telling my father that I was afraid he might have wanted for something while I was away, and to reassure me, he emptied his purse on the table. Come, father," he continued, "put that money back in your pocket. Unless, of course, our neighbour needs some for himself, in which case it is at his disposal." "Indeed not, my boy," said Caderousse. "I need nothing, and thank God my business holds body and soul together. Keep your money, keep it, one can never have too much. Still, I am obliged for your offer, as much as if I had taken advantage of it." "It was well meant," said Dantès. "I don't doubt that it was. So, I learn that you are on good terms with Monsieur Morrel, sly one that you are." "Monsieur Morrel has always been very good to me," Dantès answered. "In that case you were wrong to refuse dinner with him." "What do you mean, refuse dinner?" old Dantès asked. "Did he invite you to dinner?" "Yes, father," said Edmund, smiling at his father's astonishment on learning of this high honour. "So why did you refuse, son?" the old man asked. "So that I could come straight back here, father," the young man answered. "I was anxious to see you." "He must have been put out by it, that good Monsieur Morrel," Caderousse remarked. "When one hopes to be made captain, it is a mistake to get on the wrong side of one's owner." I explained the reason for my refusal, and I hope he understood it. "Even so, to be promoted to captain, one must flatter one's bosses a little." "I expect to become captain without that," Dantès retorted. "So much the better. All your old friends will be pleased for you, and I know someone over there behind the Citadel de Saint Nicolas who will not be unhappy about it either." "Mercédès?" the old man said. "Yes, father," Dantès resumed, "and with your permission, now that I've seen you, now that I know you are well and that you have all you need, I would like to ask your leave to go and visit Les Catalans." "Go, child," old Dantès said, "and may God bless you as much in your wife as he has blessed me in my son." "His wife?" said Caderousse. "Hold on, man, hold on. As far as I know, she's not that yet." "No," Edmund replied, "but in all probability she soon will be." "Never mind," said Caderousse, "never mind. You have done well to hurry back, my boy." "Why?" "Because Mercédès is a beautiful girl, and beautiful girls are never short of admirers, especially that one. There are dozens of them after her." "Really?" Edmund said with a smile, not entirely concealing a hint of unease. "Oh yes," Caderousse continued, "and some with good prospects too. But of course you are going to be a captain, so she'll be sure not to refuse you." "By which you mean," Dantès said, smiling but barely concealing his anxiety, "that if I were not a captain—" "Ah, said Caderousse. "Come now," the young man said, I have a better opinion than you of women in general, and Mercédès in particular, and I am persuaded that whether I were a captain or not, she would remain faithful to me." "So much the better. When one is going to get married, it is always a good thing to have faith. But enough of that. Take my advice, lad. Don't waste any time in telling her of your return and letting her know about your aspirations." I'm going at once," said Edmund. He embraced his father, nodded to Caderousse, and left. Caderousse stayed a moment longer, then, taking his leave of the elder Dantès, followed the young man down and went to find Danglars, who was waiting for him on the corner of the Rue Senac. "Well?" Danglars asked. "Did you see him?" "I have just left them," said Caderousse. "And did he talk about his hope of being made captain?" "He spoke of it as though it had already been appointed." "Patience," Danglars said. "It seems to me that he is in rather too much of a hurry." "Why, it seems Monsieur Morrel has given him his word." "So he is pleased?" "He is even insolent about it. He has already offered me his services like some superior personage. He wanted to lend me money, like some banker or other." "You refused?" "Indeed I did, though I could well have accepted, and since I am the one who gave him the first silver coins he ever had in his hands. But now Monsieur Dantès has no need of anyone. He is going to be a captain." "Huh," said Danglars. "He is not one yet." My God, it would be a fine thing indeed if he wasn't, said Caderousse. Otherwise there will be no talking to him. If we really want, said Danglars, he will stay as he is, and perhaps even become less than he is. What do you mean? Nothing. I was talking to myself. Is he still in love with the beautiful Catalan? Madly. He has gone there now, but unless I am gravely mistaken, he will not find things altogether to his liking. Explain. What does it matter? This is more important than you may think. You don't like Dantès, do you? I don't like arrogance. Well then, tell me what you know about the Catalan woman. I have no positive proof, but I have seen things, as I said, that make me think that the future captain will not be pleased with what he finds around the Chemin de Vieux infirmary. What have you seen? Come on, tell me. Well, I have observed that every time Mercedes comes into town, she is accompanied by a large Catalan lad, with black eyes, ruddy cheeks, very dark in colour and very passionate, whom she calls my cousin. Ah, indeed. And do you think this cousin is courting her? I imagine so. What else does a fine lad of 21 do to a pretty girl of 17? And you say that Dantès has gone to Le Catalan? He left before me. Suppose we were to go in the same direction, stop in the Reserve, and over a glass of La Malgue wine, learn what we can learn? Who would tell us anything? We shall be on the spot, and will see what has happened from Dantès' face. Let's go, then, said Caderousse. But are you paying? Certainly, Danglars replied. The two of them set off at a brisk pace for the spot they had mentioned, and when they arrived, called for a bottle and 2 glasses. Old Pamphile had seen Dantès go by less than 2 minutes before. Certain that he was in Le Catalan, they sat under the budding leaves of the plane trees and sycamores, in the branches of which a happy band of birds was serenading one of the first fine days of spring. Chapter 3. Le Catalan. 100 yards away from the place where the two friends, staring into the distance with their ears pricked, were enjoying the sparkling wine of La Margue, lay the village of Le Catalan, behind a bare hillock ravaged by the sun and the mistral. One day, a mysterious group of colonists set out from Spain and landed on this spit of land, where it still resides today. No one knew where they had come from or what language they spoke. One of the leaders, who understood Provençal, asked the commune of Marseille to give him this bare land and arid promontory onto which, like the sailors of antiquity, they had drawn up their boats. The request was granted, and 3 months later a little village grew up around the 12 or 15 boats that had brought these people of the sea. The same village, built in a bizarre and picturesque manner that is partly Moorish and partly Spanish, is the one that can be seen today, inhabited by the descendants of those men who speak the language of their forefathers. For 3 or 4 centuries they have remained faithful to the little promontory on which they first landed, clinging to it like a flock of seabirds, in no way mixing with the inhabitants of Marseille, marrying among themselves and retaining the habits and dress of their motherland, just as they have retained its tongue. The reader must follow us along the only street of the little village and enter one of those houses, to the outside of which the sunlight has given that lovely colour of dead leaves which is peculiar to the buildings of the country, with, inside, a coat of whitewash, the only decoration of a Spanish posada. A lovely young girl with jet-black hair and the velvet eyes of a gazelle was standing, leaning against an inner wall, rubbing an innocent sprig of heather between slender fingers like those on a classical statue, and pulling off the flowers, the remains of which were already strewn across the floor. At the same time her arms, naked to the elbow, arms that were tanned but otherwise seemed modelled on those of the Venus of Arles, trembled with a sort of feverish impatience, and she was tapping the ground with her supple, well-made foot, revealing a leg that was shapely, bold and proud, but imprisoned in a red cotton stocking patterned in grey and blue lozenges. A short distance away, a tall young man of between 20 and 22 was sitting on a chair, rocking it fitfully on 2 legs, while supporting himself on his elbow against an old worm-eaten dresser, and watching her with a look that combined anxiety with irritation. His eyes were questioning, but those of the young woman, firm and unwavering, dominated their conversation. "Please, Mercedes," the man said, "Easter is coming round again. It's the time for weddings. Give me your answer." "You have had it 100 times, Fernand, and you really must like torturing yourself to ask me again." "Well, repeat it, I beg you. Repeat it once more so that I can come to believe it. Tell me for the 100th time that you reject my love, even though your mother approves of me. Convince me that you are prepared to trifle with my happiness, and that my life and my death are nothing to you. My God, to dream for 10 years of being your husband, Mercedes, and then to lose that hope which was the sole aim of my existence." "I, at least, never encouraged you in that hope, Fernand," Mercedes replied. "You cannot accuse me of having even once flirted with you. I've said repeatedly I love you like a brother, but never demand anything more from me than this fraternal love, because my heart belongs to another. Isn't that what I have always told you, Fernand?" "Yes, Mercedes, I know," the young man replied. "Yes, you have always been laudably and cruelly honest with me. Excuse me. But are you forgetting that it is a sacred law among the Catalans only to marry among themselves?" "You are wrong, Fernand. It is not a law, but a custom, nothing more, and I advise you not to appeal to that custom on your behalf. You have been chosen for conscription, Fernand, and the freedom that you now enjoy is merely a temporary reprieve. At any moment you might be called up to serve in the army. Once you are a soldier, what will you do with me? I mean, with a poor orphan girl, sad and penniless, whose only possession is a hut almost in ruins, in which hang a few worn nets, the paltry legacy that was left by my father to my mother and my mother to me. Consider, Fernand, that in the year since she died I have virtually lived on charity. Sometimes you pretend that I am of some use to you, so that you can be justified in sharing your catch with me. And I accept, Fernand, because you are the son of one of my father's brothers, because we grew up together, and beyond that, most of all, because it would hurt you too much if I were to refuse. But I know full well that the fish I take to the market, which bring me the money to buy the hemp that I spin, I know full well, Fernand, that it is charity. What does it matter, Mercedes, poor and alone as you are, when you suit me thus better than the daughter of the proudest ship-owner or the richest banker in Marseille? What do people like us need? An honest wife and a good housekeeper. Where could I find better than you on either score?" "Fernand," Mercedes replied, shaking her head, "one is not a good housekeeper, and one cannot promise to remain an honest woman when one loves a man other than one's husband. Be satisfied with my friendship, for I repeat, that is all I can promise you, and I only promise what I am sure of being able to give." "Yes, I understand," said Fernand. "You bear your own poverty patiently, but you are afraid of mine. Well, Mercedes, with your love I would try and make my fortune. You would bring me luck, and I should become rich. I can cast my fisherman's net wider. I can take a job as a clerk in a shop. I could even become a merchant myself." "You can't do any such thing, Fernand. You're a soldier, and if you stay here among the Catalans, it is because there is no war for you to fight. So remain a fisherman, don't dream of things that will make reality seem even more terrible to you, and be content with my friendship, because I cannot give you anything else." "You are right, Mercedes. I shall be a seaman, and instead of the dress of our forefathers which you despise, I shall have a patent leather hat, a striped shirt, and a blue jacket with anchors on the buttons. That's how a man needs to dress, isn't it, if he wants to please you?" "What do you mean?" Mercedes asked, with an imperious look. "What do you mean? I don't understand you." What I mean, Mercedes, is that you are only so hard-hearted and cruel towards me because you are waiting for someone who is dressed like that. But it may be that the one who you await is fickle, and even if he isn't, the sea will be fickle for him." "Fernand!" Mercedes exclaimed. "I thought you were kind, but I was mistaken. It is wicked of you to call on the wrath of God to satisfy your jealousy. Yes, I will not deny it. I am waiting for the man you describe. I love him, and if he does not return, instead of blaming the fickleness that it pleases you to speak of, I shall think that he died loving me." The young Catalan made an angry gesture. "I understand what that means, Fernand. You want to blame him because I do not love you, and cross his dagger with your Catalan knife. What good would that do you? If you were defeated, you would lose my friendship. If you were the victor, you would see that friendship turn to hatred. Believe me, when a woman loves a man, you do not win her heart by crossing swords with him. No, Fernand, don't be carried away by evil thoughts. Since you cannot have me as your wife, be content to have me as a friend and a sister." "In any case," she added, her eyes anxious and filling with tears, "stay, Fernand. You said yourself a moment ago that the sea is treacherous. It is already 4 months since he left, and I have counted a lot of storms in the past 4 months." Fernand remained impassive. He made no attempt to wipe the tears that were running down Mercedes' cheeks, yet he would have given a glass of his own blood for each of those tears, but they were shed for another. He got up, walked around the hut, and returned, stopping before Mercedes with a dark look in his eyes and clenched fists. "Come now, Mercedes," he asked. "Answer me once more. Have you truly made up your mind?" "I love Edmond Dantès," the young woman said coldly, "and no one will be my husband except Edmond." "And you will love him forever?" "As long as I live." Fernand bent his head like a discouraged man, gave a sigh that was like a groan, then suddenly looked up with clenched teeth and nostrils flared. "But suppose he is dead?" "If he is dead, I shall die." "And if he forgets you?" "Mercedes!" cried a happy voice outside the house. "Mercedes!" "Ah!" the girl exclaimed, reddening with joy and leaping up, filled with love. "You see that he has not forgotten me. He is here." And she ran to the door and opened it, crying, "Come to me, Edmond! I am here!" Pale and trembling, Fernand stepped back, as a traveller might do at the sight of a snake, and, stumbling against his chair, fell back into it. Edmond and Mercedes were in each other's arms. The hot Marseille sun, shining through the doorway, drenched them in a flood of light. At first they saw nothing of what was around them. A vast wave of happiness cut them off from the world, and they spoke only those half-formed words that are the outpourings of such intense joy that they resemble the expression of pain. Suddenly Edmond noticed the sombre figure of Fernand, pale and threatening in the darkness. With a gesture of which he was not even himself aware, the young Catalan had laid his hand on the knife at his belt. "Oh, forgive me," Dantès said, raising an eyebrow. "I did not realize that we were not alone." Then, turning to Mercedes, he asked, "Who is this gentleman?" "He will be your best friend, Dantès, because he is my friend, my cousin, and my brother. This is Fernand, which means he is the man whom, after you, I love most in the world. Don't you recognize him?" "Ah, yes, indeed," said Edmond, and without leaving Mercedes, whose hand he held clasped in one of his own, he extended the other with a cordial gesture towards the Catalan. But Fernand, instead of responding to this sign of friendship, remained as silent and motionless as a statue. It was enough to make Edmond look inquiringly from Mercedes, who was trembling with emotion, to Fernand, sombre and threatening. That one glance told him everything. His brow clouded with rage. "I did not realize that I had hurried round to see you, Mercedes, only to find an enemy here." "An enemy?" Mercedes exclaimed, looking angrily in the direction of her cousin. An enemy in my house, you say, Edmund? If I thought that, I should take your arm and go with you to Marseille, leaving this house never to return." Fernand's eyes lit up with rage. "And if any misfortune were to befall you, my dear Edmund," she continued with the same cool determination, proving to Fernand that she had read the sinister depths of his mind, "if any misfortune should happen to you, I should climb up the Cap de Morjou and throw myself headlong onto the rocks." The blood drained from Fernand's face. "But you are wrong, Edmund," she continued. "You have no enemies here. The only person here is Fernand, my brother, who is going to shake your hand like a true friend." With these words, the girl turned her imperious face towards the Catalan, and he, as if mesmerized by her look, slowly came across to Edmund and held out his hand. His hatred, like an impotent wave, had been broken against the ascendancy that the woman had exercised over him. But no sooner had he touched Edmund's hand than he felt he had done all that it was possible for him to do, and rushed out of the house. "Ah!" he cried, running along like a madman and burying his hands in his hair. "Ah, who will deliver me from this man? Wretch that I am! Wretch that I am!" "Hey, Catalan! Hey, Fernand, where are you going?" a voice called to him. The young man stopped dead, looked around, and saw Caderousse at the table with Danglars under a leafy arbour. "What now?" said Caderousse. "Why don't you join us? Are you in such a hurry that you don't have time to say hello to your friends?" "Especially when they still have an almost full bottle in front of them," Danglars added. Fernand stared at the two men with a dazed look, and did not answer. "He seems a bit down in the dumps," Danglars said, nudging Caderousse with his knee. "Could we be wrong? Contrary to what we thought, could it be that Dantès has got the upper hand?" "Why, we'll just have to find out," said Caderousse, and turning back to the young man, he said, "Well, Catalan, have you made up your mind?" Fernand wiped the sweat from his brow and slowly made his way under the vault of leaves. Its shade appeared to do something to calm his spirits, and its coolness to bring a small measure of well-being back to his exhausted body. "Good day," he said. "I think you called me?" "I called you because you were running along like a madman, and I was afraid you would go and throw yourself into the sea," Caderousse said with a laugh. "Devil take it, when one has friends, it is not only to offer them a glass of wine, but also to stop them drinking 3 or 4 pints of water." Fernand gave a groan which resembled a sob, and let his head fall onto his wrists, which were crossed on the table. "Well now, do you want me to tell you what, Fernand?" Caderousse continued, coming straight to the point with that crude brutality of the common man whose curiosity makes him forget any sense of tact. "You look to me like a man who has been crossed in love." He accompanied this quip with a roar of laughter. Danglars retorted. "A lad built like that is not likely to be unhappy in love. You must be joking, Caderousse." "Not at all," the other said. "Just listen to him sigh." "Come, Fernand, come now. Lift your nose off the table and tell us. It is not very mannerly to refuse to answer your friends when they are asking after your health." "My health is fine," said Fernand, clenching his fists and without looking up. "Ah, Danglars, you see now," Caderousse said, winking at his friend. "This is how things are. Fernand here, who is a fine, brave Catalan, one of the best fishermen in Marseille, is in love with a beautiful girl called Mercedes, but it appears that, unfortunately, the girl herself is in love with the second mate of the Pharaon, and as the Pharaon came into port this very day— You follow me?" "No, I don't," said Danglars. "Poor Fernand has got his marching orders," Caderousse continued. "So what then?" said Fernand, lifting his head and looking at Caderousse like a man anxious to find someone on whom to vent his wrath. "Mercedes is her own woman, isn't she? She is free to love whomsoever she wants." "Oh, if that's how you take it," said Caderousse, "that's another matter. I thought you were a Catalan, and I have been told that the Catalans are not men to let themselves be pushed aside by a rival. They even said that Fernand in particular was fearsome in his vengeance." Fernand smiled pityingly. "A lover is never fearsome," he said. "Poor boy," Danglars continued, pretending to grieve for the young man from the bottom of his heart. "What do you expect? He didn't imagine that Dantès would suddenly return like this. He may have thought him dead or unfaithful. Who knows? Such things are all the more distressing when they happen to us suddenly." "In any event," Caderousse said, drinking as he spoke and starting to show the effects of the heady wine of La Malgue, "in any event, Fernand is not the only person to have been put out by Dantès' fortunate return, is he, Danglars?" "No, what you say is true, and I might even add that it will bring him misfortune." "No matter," Caderousse went on, pouring out some wine for Fernand and replenishing his own glass for the 8th or 10th time, though Danglars had hardly touched the one in front of him. "No matter. In the meantime he will marry Mercedes, the lovely Mercedes. He has come back for that, at least." While the other was speaking, Danglars directed a piercing look at the young man, on whose heart Caderousse's words were falling like molten lead. "And when is the wedding?" he asked. "Oh, it's not settled yet," Fernand muttered. "No, but it will be," said Caderousse, "just as surely as Dantès will be captain of the Pharaon, don't you think, Danglars?" Danglars shuddered at this unexpected stab, and turned towards Caderousse, studying his face now to see if the blow had been premeditated, but he saw nothing except covetousness on this face, already almost besotted with drink. "Very well," he said, filling the glasses, "then let's drink to Captain Edmond Dantès, husband of the beautiful Catalan." Caderousse lifted his glass to his lips with a sluggish hand, and drained it in one gulp. Fernand took his and dashed it to the ground. "Ah," said Caderousse, "what can I see over there, on the crest of the hill, coming from the Catalan village? You look, Fernand, your eyesight is better than mine. I think I'm starting to see less clearly, and as you know, wine is a deceptive imp. It looks to me like two lovers walking along, side by side and hand in hand. Heaven forgive me, they don't realize that we can see them, and oh, look at that, they're kissing one another." Danglars marked every single trait of the anguish that crossed Fernand's face, as its features changed before his eyes. "Do you know who they are, Monsieur Fernand?" he asked. "Yes," the other replied dully. "It's Monsieur Edmond and Mademoiselle Mercedes." "There, you see," said Caderousse. "I didn't recognize them. Hey, Dantès! Hey there, pretty girl. Come down for a moment and let us know when the wedding is. Fernand here is so stubborn, he won't tell us." "Why don't you be quiet?" said Danglars, pretending to restrain Caderousse, who, with drunken obstinacy, was leaning out of the arbour. "Try to stay upright and let the lovers enjoy themselves in peace. Why, look at Monsieur Fernand. He's being sensible. Why not try and do the same?" It may be that Fernand, driven to the limit and baited by Danglars like a bull by the banderillos, would have finally leapt forward, for he had already stood up and appeared to be gathering strength to throw himself at his rival. But Mercedes, upright and laughing, threw back her lovely head and shot a glance from her clear eyes. At that moment Fernand recalled her threat to die if Edmond should die, and slumped back, discouraged, on his chair. Danglars looked at the two men, one besotted by drink, the other enslaved by love, and murmured, "I shall get nothing out of these idiots. I fear I am sitting between a drunkard and a coward. On the one hand, I have a man eaten up by envy, drowning his sorrows in drink when he should be intoxicated with venom. On the other, a great simpleton whose mistress has just been snatched away from under his very nose, who does nothing except weep like a child and feel sorry for himself. And yet he has the blazing eyes of a Spaniard, a Sicilian or Calabrian, those people who are such experts when it comes to revenge, and fists that would crush a bull's head as surely as a butcher's mallet. Fate is definitely on Edmund's side. He will marry the beautiful girl, become captain, and laugh in our faces. Unless... A pallid smile hovered on Danglars' lips. Unless I take a hand in it. Caderousse, half standing with his fists on the table, was still shouting, "Hello there! Hello, Edmund! Can't you see your friends, or are you too proud to talk to them?" "No, my dear Caderousse," Edmund replied. "I am not proud, but I am happy. And happiness, I believe, is even more dazzling than pride." "At last all is explained," said Caderousse. "Oh, good day to you, Madame Dantès." Mercédès bowed gravely and said, "That is not yet my name, and in my country they say it is bad luck to call a young woman by the name of her betrothed before he has become her husband. So please call me Mercédès." "You must forgive my good neighbour Caderousse," Dantès said. "He so seldom makes a mistake." "So the wedding is to take place shortly, Monsieur Dantès," Danglars said, greeting the two young people. "As soon as possible, Monsieur Danglars. Today everything is to be agreed at my father's house, and tomorrow, or at the latest the day after, we shall have the engagement dinner here at La Réserve. I hope that my friends will join us. You, of course, are invited, Monsieur Danglars, and you too, Caderousse." "And Fernand?" Caderousse asked with a coarse laugh. "Will Fernand be there as well?" "My wife's brother is my brother," Edmund said, "and both Mercédès and I should regret it deeply if he were to be separated from us at such a time." Fernand opened his mouth to reply, but his voice caught in his throat, and he could not utter a single word. "The agreement today, the engagement tomorrow or the day after? By George, you're in a great hurry, Captain." "Danglars," Edmund said with a smile, "I shall say the same to you as Mercédès did a moment ago. Don't give me a title that does not yet belong to me. It could bring me ill luck." "My apologies," Danglars replied. "I was merely saying that you seem in a great hurry. After all, we have plenty of time. The Pharaon will not set sail for a good 3 months. One always hurries towards happiness, Monsieur Danglars, because when one has suffered much, one is at pains to believe in it. But I am not impelled by mere selfishness. I have to go to Paris." "Ah, indeed, to Paris. And this will be your first visit, Dantès?" "Yes." "You have business there?" "Not of my own, but a final request that I must carry out for our poor Captain Leclerc. You understand, Danglars, that mission is sacred to me. In any event, don't worry. I shall be gone only as long as it takes to go there and return." Yes, I understand," Danglars said aloud. Then he added, under his breath, "To Paris, no doubt to deliver the letter that the Marshal gave him. By heaven, that letter has given me an idea. An excellent idea." "Ah, Dantès, my friend, your name is not yet number 1 on the register of the Pharaon." Then turning back to Edmund, who was leaving, he shouted, "Bon voyage!" "Thank you," Edmund replied, turning around and giving a friendly wave. Then the two lovers went on their way, calm and happy as two chosen souls heading for paradise. Chapter 4. The Plot. Danglars' eyes followed Edmund and Mercédès until the two lovers had vanished round one corner of the Fort Saint-Nicolas. Then, turning at last, he noticed Fernand, who had slipped back onto his chair, pale and trembling, while Caderousse was mumbling the words of a drinking song. "So, my good sir," Danglars told Fernand, "not everyone, I think, is happy about this marriage." "I am in despair," said Fernand. "You're in love with Mercédès?" "I adore her." "For a long time?" "Ever since I've known her, I've always loved her." "And all you can do is sit there and tear your hair out, instead of finding some way out of the dilemma? By God, I didn't know that this was how people of your country behaved." "What do you expect me to do?" Fernand asked. "How do I know? Is it any of my business? As I see it, I'm not the one who's in love with Mademoiselle Mercédès. You are. Seek and you shall find, the Gospel says. I had found already, What? I wanted to put my knife to the creature, but the girl said that if her fiancé was harmed, she'd kill herself. Pfft, people say such things, but they don't do them. You don't know Mercedes, monsieur. If she threatens to do something, she will. Idiot, Danglars muttered. What does it matter whether she kills herself or not, provided Dantès does not become captain? And before Mercedes dies, Fernand went on in firmly resolute tones, I should die myself. There's love for you, Caderousse said in a voice increasingly slurred by drink. There's love, or I don't know it. Come now, said Danglars, you seem an agreeable enough lad to me, and, by Jove, I'd like to ease your sorrow, but— Yes, said Caderousse, come now. My good friend, Danglars remarked, you are 3/4 drunk. Go the whole way and finish the bottle. Drink, but don't interfere with our business, because you need a clear head for what we're doing. Me? Drunk? Said Caderousse. Never! I could take another 4 of your bottles, which are no bigger than bottles of eau de cologne. Père Pamphile, bring us some wine. And, to make the point, Caderousse banged his glass on the table. You were saying, monsieur? Fernand asked, impatient to hear what else Danglars had to tell him. What was I saying? I don't remember. This drunkard Caderousse has put it quite out of my mind. Drunkard if you like. A curse on those who fear wine. It's because they have evil thoughts, and they are afraid that wine will loosen their tongues. Caderousse began to sing the last 2 lines of a song which was much in vogue at the time. You were saying, monsieur, Fernand continued, that you'd like to ease my sorrow, but you added— Ah, yes, I added that, to give you satisfaction, it is enough for Dantès not to marry the one you love. And this marriage, it seems to me, could very well not take place, even if Dantès does not die. Only death will separate them, said Fernand. You have the brains of an oyster, my friend, said Caderousse. And Danglars here, who is a sharp one, crafty as a Greek, will prove you wrong. Do it, Danglars, I've stuck up for you. Tell him that Dantès doesn't have to die. In any case, it would be a pity if he died. He's a good lad, Dantès. I like him. Your health, Dantès. Fernand rose impatiently to his feet. Let him babble, Danglars said, putting a hand on the young man's arm. And, for that matter, drunk as he is not so far wrong. Absence separates as effectively as death. So just suppose that there were the walls of a prison between Edmond and Mercedes. That would separate them no more nor less than a tombstone. Yes, but people get out of prison, said Caderousse, who was gripping onto the conversation with what remained of his wits. And when you get out of prison and you are called Edmond Dantès, you take revenge. What does that matter? said Fernand. In any event, Caderousse continued, why should they put Dantès in prison? He hasn't stolen anything, killed anyone, committed any murder. Shut up, said Danglars. I don't want to shut up, said Caderousse. I want to know why they should put Dantès in prison. I like Dantès. Dantès, your health. He poured back another glass of wine. Danglars assessed the extent of the tailor's drunkenness from his dull eyes and turned towards Fernand. So you do understand that there is no need to kill him, he said. No, surely not if, as you said a moment ago, there was some means of having Dantès arrested, but do you have such a means? If we look, Danglars answered, we can find one. But, damn it, why should this concern me? What business is it of mine? I don't know why it should concern you, Fernand said, grasping his arm. What I do know is that you have some private animosity against Dantès. A man who feels hated cannot be mistaken about that feeling in others. I have some reason to hate Dantès? None, I swear. I saw that you were unhappy, and I took an interest in your unhappiness. That's all. But if you are going to imagine that I am acting on my own behalf, then farewell, my good friend, you can manage for yourself. Here Danglars himself made as if to get up. No, stay, said Fernand. "When it comes down to it, it's of no matter to me whether you have some bone to pick with Dantès or not. I do, and I freely admit it. Find the means and I shall carry it out, as long as there is no murder involved, for Mercédès said that she will kill herself if anyone killed Dantès." Caderousse, who had let his head fall on the table, lifted it and turned his dull, drink-sodden eyes on Fernand and Danglars. "Kill Dantès?" he said. "Who's talking about killing Dantès? I don't want him killed. He's my friend. This morning he offered to share his money with me, as I shared mine with him. I don't want anyone to kill Dantès." "Who said anything about killing him, idiot?" Danglars went on. "It's nothing more than a joke. Drink to his health and leave us be," he added, filling Caderousse's glass. Yes, to Dantès' health," said Caderousse, emptying his glass. His health, like that." "But the means, what about the means?" Fernand asked. "You haven't thought of any yet?" "No, you said you would do that." "That's true," said Danglars. "A Spaniard is inferior to a Frenchman in one respect. Your Spaniard thinks things over, but your Frenchman thinks them up." "Well, think up something then," Fernand said impatiently. "Waiter," Danglars called. "A pen, ink, and paper." "A pen, ink, and paper," Fernand muttered. "Yes, I am an accountant. Pens, ink, and paper are the tools of my trade, and without them I can do nothing." "A pen, some ink, and some paper," Fernand repeated to the waiter. "What you need is over there on the table," the waiter said, indicating the items they had requested. "Give them to us, then." The waiter brought the paper, some ink, and a quill pen, and put them on the table in the arbour. "When you think," Caderousse said, letting his hand fall onto the paper, "that what you have here can kill a man more surely than if you were to hide in the woods to murder him. I've always been more afraid of a pen, a bottle of ink, and a sheet of paper than a sword or a pistol." "This clown is not yet as drunk as he seems," said Danglars. "Pour him another drink, Fernand." Fernand filled Caderousse's glass, and he, like the true drunkard he was, took his hand off the paper and moved it to his glass. The Catalan watched him until Caderousse, almost floored by this new assault, put his glass back, or rather let it fall, onto the table. "Well?" the Catalan asked, seeing that the last traces of Caderousse's wits had begun to disappear in this final draught of wine. "As I was saying," Danglars continued, "for example, after a voyage such as the one Dantès has just made, in the course of which he put in at Naples and the island of Elba, if someone were to denounce him to the crown prosecutor as a Bonapartist agent—" "I'll denounce him, I'll do it," the young man said eagerly. "Yes, but in that case you would have to sign your declaration and be confronted with the man you accused. I could give you proof to support your accusation, I know, but Dantès cannot stay in prison forever. One day he will come out, and on that day woe betide the one who put him there." "Oh, I couldn't ask for anything better," said Fernand. "Let him come and challenge me." "Yes, but what about Mercédès? Mercédès, who will hate you if you are unfortunate enough to leave even a scratch on her beloved Edmond." "That's true," said Fernand. No, Danglars continued. "You see, if we were to make up our minds to such a thing, it would be far better simply to do as I am doing now, and take this pen, dip it in the ink, and with one's left hand, to disguise the writing, make out a little denunciation in these terms." To illustrate his meaning, Danglars wrote the following lines with his left hand, the writing sloping backwards so that it bore no resemblance to his usual handwriting, then passed it to Fernand, who read it in a hushed voice. "The Crown Prosecutor is advised by a friend of the monarchy and the faith that one Edmond Dantès, first mate of the Pharaon, arriving this morning from Smyrna after putting in at Naples and Porto Ferrajo, was entrusted by Murat with a letter for the usurper, and by the usurper with a letter to the Bonapartist committee in Paris. Proof of his guilt will be found when he is arrested, since the letter will be discovered either on his person or at the house of his father, or in his cabin on board the Pharaon." "So there we have it," Danglars continued. In this way your revenge would be consistent with common sense, because it could be in no way traced back to you, and the matter would proceed of its own accord. You would merely have to fold the letter, as I am doing now, and write on it, 'To the Crown Prosecutor.' That would settle it." And Danglars wrote the address with a simple stroke of the pen.
"Yes, that would settle it,"
cried Caderousse, who had made one final effort to muster his wits and follow the reading of the letter, and understood instinctively all the misfortune that such a denunciation could bring.
"Yes, that would settle it, except that that would be a vile act."
And he reached over to take the letter. "Which is why," said Danglars, pushing it beyond the reach of his hand, "which is why what I am saying and doing is simply in jest, and I should be the first to be upset if anything were to happen to Dantès, dear Dantès, so watch." He took the letter, crumpled it in his hands, and threw it into a corner of the arbour.
"That's right," said Caderousse. "Dantès is my friend, and I don't want anyone to harm him."
"The devil take it! Whoever would think of doing him harm? Certainly not I or Fernand," said Danglars, getting up and looking at the young man, who had remained seated, but who had had his covetous eye fixed sideways on the accusing letter where it had fallen.
"And in that case,"
Caderousse went on, "bring us more wine. I want to drink to the health of the Edmund and lovely Mercedes." "You have had enough to drink already, you tippler," said Danglars. "If you go on, you will have to sleep here, because you won't be able to stand up."
"Me?"
said Caderousse, rising with the ridiculous movement of a drunken man.
"Me not be able to stand up? I wager I could go up the belfry of Les Sacoulles without wavering."
"Well, if you wish," said Danglars, "I accept the wager, but for tomorrow. Today it is time to go home, so give me your arm and we'll get started."
"Let's go," said Caderousse, "but I don't need your arm for it. Are you coming, Fernand? Come with us to Marseille."
"No," said Fernand. "I'm going back to Le Catalan."
"Don't be silly. Come with us to Marseille. Come on."
"I have no business in Marseille, and I don't want to go there."
"What did you say? You don't want to, my lad? Well, just do as you wish. Everyone can do as he wishes. Come on, Danglars, and let this gentleman go back to the Catalan, since that's what he wants."
Danglars took advantage of Caderousse's momentary amenability to drag him towards Marseille, but to leave a shorter and easier way free for Fernand, instead of going back via the Quai de la Rive Neuve, he went back through the Porte Saint-Victor. Caderousse followed, swaying and gripping his arm. When he had gone some 20 yards, Danglars turned around and saw Fernand grab the piece of paper and put it in his pocket. Then, running out of the arbour, the young man immediately went in the direction of Les Pions.
"Then how was he up to?" said Caderousse. "He lied to us. He said he was going to Le Catalan, and he's headed into town. Hey, Fernand, my boy, you're going the wrong way."
"It's you who can't see properly," said Danglars. "He has gone straight down the road to the Vieille Infirmerie."
"Has he?" said Caderousse. "Well, now, I could have sworn that he turned to the right. Wine really is a deceiver."
Come on," Danglars muttered. "I think that the matter is properly under way now, and all we have to do is to let it take its course." And that is where I shall stop and take a break, I think. I need to find a bookmark. I have found a bookmark. I am enjoying reading a drunk character far too much. It's so much fun. Thanks, Salad. It's kind of hard because it's a lot of use the trumpet. Thanks, Budop. Also, hi. Hope you're well. I'm amazing at it while reading drunk. I don't know if that's a good thing, but thank you. It's really difficult reading dialogue that doesn't have much in the way of like he said, she said, they did this. The French is nothing to be ashamed of. Oh, thank you. I'm trying. Thank you. Oh dear. But yes, I shall go and have a break and make myself a cup of tea. and I hope you all can do something similar, and I will see you... Oh, night salad. Also, I saw Syl disappeared, so good night, Syl, if you're watching the VOD. But yes, you're off as well, Limaka. Well, both of you have a good rest of the night, and sleep well. But the French is better than yours. I doubt that, Boo. I really doubt that. I'm just going... But yes, those who are going, go have good sleeps, and those who are staying, I shall see you in about 5 minutes. Bye for now. Hello, greetings, I return. Apologies for a slightly longer break than usual. If it was, I don't know. I came back and it said now, and I assume it had said now for a while. So, yes, sorry the break was a little bit longer. The kettle took a bit longer than I expected to boil. But now I have a tea, so all is good. Also opened a box of Turkish Delight that I got given for Christmas, which was really nice, turns out. I mean, I like Turkish Delight anyway, but this one was like pistachio and hazelnut, which I've never had pistachio and hazelnut Turkish Delight, and it wasn't too sweet. Really good. It's actually got like bits of hazelnut and pistachio in it. It was great. Probably really bad for my teeth, but now sell all your friends to the Ice Queen. Yeah. I think that's probably like rose and lemon Turkish Delight though. Rose Turkish Delight's pretty great though. I mean, one of the characters in this is called Edmund, so, although spelt Edmond because French, I don't know. But right. Got through 4 chapters already, that's not bad. Although looking at the actual sort of number of pages that I've got through, and then looking at the rest of the book, oh boy, we've got a lot of pages to go. But yes, I hope everybody has had a nice break. I hope you all have comfy seat, a hot beverage of some description, and are nice and chilled. Stop playing the next book. Yeah, maybe in like a year. Because I feel like this might take that long. I don't know. But yes, if we're all sitting comfortably, I shall continue. And I will take sips of tea. This is a Persona 5 of books. Yes, it is. Also, I saw you mention cabin pressure earlier. Why did you mention cabin pressure? Oh, Fernand is about to update his MSN Messenger username to Dashboard Confessional Lyrics. Nice. Yeah, I realised I was kind of doing a Douglas voice for what's-his-face? Catarus. So I decided to lean more heavily into it. But then he got drunk, so it's fine. But yes, I shall continue with Chapter 5, The Betrothal. The next day the weather was fine. The sun rose, brilliant and clear, and its first purple rays glistened like rubies on the foamy crests of the waves. The meal had been set out on the first floor of the same inn, La Réserve, with the terrace of which we are already acquainted. It was a large room, lit by 5 or 6 windows, above each of which, for some inexplicable reason, was inscribed the name of one of the great towns of France. A gallery of wood, like the rest of the building, ran the whole length of the room under the windows. Although the meal was due to begin only at noon, this gallery was crowded with impatient onlookers from 11 o'clock in the morning. These were a few chosen sailors from the Pharaon and some soldiers who were Dantes' friends. All of them were in their Sunday best, in honour of the engaged couple. The rumour circulating among these expectant guests was that the owners of the Pharaon were to honour its first mate's betrothal feast with their presence, but this would have been to do such a great honour to Dantes that no one yet dared believe it. However, Danglars, when he arrived with Caderousse, confirmed the news. He had seen Monsieur Morel himself that morning, and Monsieur Morel had said that he would be dining at La Réserve. Indeed, a moment later, Monsieur Morel made his entrance into the room and was saluted by the crew of the Pharaon with a unanimous burst of applause and shouts of hurrah. The owner's presence was seen by them as confirmation of a rumour already going about that Dantes was to be appointed captain. And, since Dantes was much liked on board, the men took this way of thanking the owner because, for once, his choice was concordant with their wishes. Hardly had Monsieur Morel entered than Danglars and Caderousse were, by general agreement, dispatched to find the fiancé, with orders to advise him of the arrival of this important person whose appearance had caused such a stir, and to tell him to hurry. Danglars and Caderousse set off at full speed, but had hardly gone any distance before they saw the little band approaching, just coming past the powder magazine. It was made up of 4 young women, friends of Mercédès and Catalans like her, who were accompanying the fiancé while Edmond gave her his arm. Next to her walked old Dantès, and behind them came Fernand with his sour smile. Neither Mercédès nor Edmond could see the smile on Fernand's face. The poor children were so happy that they saw nothing except one another and the pure, clear sky that showered its blessing on them. Danglars and Caderousse discharged their diplomatic mission, then exchanged a warm and energetic handshake with Edmond, and took up their places, Danglars next to Fernand and Caderousse beside old Dantès, who was the general centre of attention. The old man was wearing his fine coat of fluted taffeta, decorated with large faceted steel buttons. His lanky but vigorous legs were clothed in a splendid pair of spotted stockings that cried out English contraband. A mass of white and blue ribbons hung from his 3-cornered hat. Finally, he was supported by a stick of twisted wood, bent at the top like a classical staff or pedum. He looked like one of those dandies who used to parade in 1796 in the newly reopened gardens of the Luxembourg or the Tuileries. As we said, Caderousse had slipped into step beside him. Caderousse entirely reconciled with the Dantès by the prospect of a good meal, Caderousse whose mind retained some vague memory of what had happened the previous day, as one's brain on waking in the morning may hold a shadow of the dream that it experienced in sleep. As he came up to Fernand, Danglars searched deep into the disappointed lover's soul. He was walking behind the engaged couple, entirely forgotten by Mercédès, who, with the childlike and endearing egoism of love, had eyes only for her Edmond. Fernand was pale, then his colour would heighten suddenly, only to give way again to a deepening pallor. From time to time he looked towards Marseille, and an involuntary nervous tremor would shake his limbs. He seemed to be expecting, or at least to anticipate the possibility of, some important event. Dantès was dressed simply. Since he belonged to the merchant marine, his clothes were halfway between military uniform and civilian dress. In this habit his evident good health, set off against the happiness and beauty of his fiancée, was perfect. Mercédès was as lovely as one of those Greek women of Cyprus, with jet-black eyes and coral lips. She stepped out with the frankness and freedom of an Alsacienne or an Andalusian woman. A city girl might have perhaps tried to conceal her joy under a veil, or at least beneath the velvet shade of her eyelids, but Mercédès smiled and looked at all those around her, and her look and her smile said as plainly as she could have in words, "If you are my friends, rejoice with me, because I am truly happy." As soon as the couple and those accompanying them were in sight of La Réserve, Monsieur Morel came down and set out to meet them, followed by the sailors and soldiers. He had stayed with them to renew the promise he had already made to Dantès himself, that he would succeed Captain Leclerc. Seeing him approach, Edmond let go of his fiancée's arm, which he placed under Monsieur Morel's. Thus the ship-owner and the young woman gave a lead by going first up the wooden stairs leading to the room where dinner was served, and the staircase groaned for 5 minutes under the heavy feet of the guests. "Father," Mercédès said, stopping at the middle of the table, "you go on my right, I pray you, and on my left I shall place the one who has been a brother to me." She spoke with such softness that it struck Fernand to the depth of his soul like a blow from a dagger. His lips paled, and under the tanned colouring of his masculine features you could once more see the blood draining bit by bit as it flooded into his heart. Meanwhile, Dantès had done the same. On his right he placed Monsieur Morel, and on his left Danglars. Then he signalled to everyone to sit down wherever they wished. Already the guests were passing around the strong-smelling Arles sausage with its brown flesh, crayfish in their dazzling armour, pink-shelled clams, sea urchins looking like chestnuts in their spiny cases, and clovis, those shellfish that gourmets from the south claim are more than an adequate substitute for the oysters of northern waters. In short, all the delicate hors d'oeuvres that are washed up by the waves on these sandy shores, and to which grateful fishermen accord the general appellation of fruits de mer. "Why this silence?" the old man exclaimed, sipping a glass of wine as yellow as topaz, which Père Pamphile in person had just set down in front of Mercedes. "Who could imagine that there are 30 people here who ask nothing better than to be merry?" "A husband is not always merry," said Caderousse. "The fact is," Dantès said, "that I am too happy at this moment to be merry. If that's what you mean, neighbour, you are right. Joy may sometimes produce strange effects and be as oppressive as sorrow." Danglars was watching Fernand, whose impressionable nature absorbed and reflected his every feeling. "Come now," he said, "have you anything to fear? It seems to me, on the contrary, that everything is working out as you would wish." "That is precisely what terrifies me," said Dantès. "I cannot think that man is meant to find happiness so easily. Happiness is like one of those palaces on an enchanted island, its gates guarded by dragons. One must fight to gain it, and, in truth, I do not know what I have done to deserve the good fortune of becoming Mercedes's husband." "Husband, husband," Caderousse said, laughing. "Not yet, Captain. Try behaving like a husband right now, and you'll see how she treats you." Mercedes blushed. Fernand was shuffling on his chair, starting at the slightest noise and from time to time wiping large beads of sweat from his forehead, which seemed to have fallen there like the first drops of rain before a storm. "By heaven, neighbour," said Dantès, "you have no need to give me the lie for so little. It is true, Mercedes is not yet my wife, but," he took out his watch, "in an hour and a half she will be." There was a gasp of surprise from everyone, except old Dantès, who exhibited his fine set of teeth in a broad laugh. Mercedes smiled and was no longer blushing. Fernand made a convulsive lunge towards the handle of his dagger. "In an hour?" said Danglars, himself going pale. "How is that?" "Yes, friends," Dantès replied, "thanks to an advance from Monsieur Morel, the man to whom, after my father, I owe the most in the world, all our difficulties have been overcome. We have paid for the banns, and at 2:30 the mayor of Marseille is expecting us at the town hall. Now, since it has just sounded 1:15, I think I am not much mistaken in saying that in 1 hour and 30 minutes Mercédès will be Madame Dante." Fernand closed his eyes. A fiery cloud was burning behind their lids, and he grasped the table to keep himself from fainting. But, despite his efforts to do so, he could not repress a deep groan that was drowned by laughter and congratulations of the guests. "That's the way to do it, no?" old Dantès said. "What would you say? Has he wasted any time? Disembarked yesterday morning, married today at 3 o'clock. Trust a sailor to get the job done without messing around." "But," Danglars put in timidly, "what about the other formalities? The contract, the settlement?" "The contract?" Dantès said with a laugh. "The contract is already made. Mercédès has nothing, and neither have I. We shall be married under a settlement of common estate, that's all. It took little time to write out and won't be expensive." This sally brought a further round of applause and hurrahs. "So, what we thought was a betrothal is nothing less than a wedding feast," said Danglars. "Not so," said Dantès. "Don't worry, you won't be missing anything. Tomorrow morning I leave for Paris, 4 days to travel there, 4 days to return, and a day to carry out my errand conscientiously. On March the 1st I shall be back. On March the 2nd, then we shall have the real wedding feast." The prospect of a second meal increased the level of hilarity to such a point that old Dantès, who had complained of the silence at the start of the dinner, was now making futile efforts in the midst of the general hubbub to propose a toast to the prosperity of the happy couple. Dantès guessed what was in his father's mind, and replied with a smile full of filial love. Mercédès had started to watch the time on the cuckoo clock in the room, and she made a sign to Edmond. Around the table reigned the noisy merriment and freedom of manners that, among people of the lower orders, are common accompaniments to the end of a meal. Those who were dissatisfied with their places had got up from the table and gone to find new neighbours. Everyone had started to speak at once, and no one was bothering to listen to what the person next to him was saying, but was concerned only with his own thoughts. Fernand's pallor was almost reflected on the cheeks of Danglars. As for Fernand himself, all life appeared to have left him, and he was like one of the damned in a lake of fire. He had been among the first to get up, and was striding backwards and forwards across the room, trying to block his ears to the sound of songs and clinking glasses. Caderousse went over to him, just as Danglars, whom he had apparently been trying to avoid, caught up with him in a corner of the room. "I must say," Caderousse remarked, the last remnants of the hatred which Dantès' unexpected good fortune had sown in his mind having succumbed to Dantès' joviality, and above all to Père Pamphil's excellent wine, "Dantès is a good fellow, and when I see him like this beside his fiancée, I feel that it would have been a pity to play the unkind trick on him that you were plotting yesterday." "Well then," Danglars replied, "you can see that the matter went no further. Poor Monsieur Fernand was so upset that, at first, I felt sorry for him, but now that he has made up his mind to accept the situation to the point of allowing himself to become his rival's best man, there is nothing more to be said." Caderousse looked at Fernand. He was deathly pale. "The sacrifice is all the greater," Danglars went on, "as the girl is so decidedly pretty. Damn it, my future captain is a lucky dog. I wish I could be in his shoes for just half a day." "Shall we go?" Mercedes said softly. "It is striking 2 and we are expected at 1:15. "Yes, let's go," Dantès exclaimed, leaping to his feet. "Let's go!" all the guests repeated in unison. At that moment, Danglars, who had not taken his eyes off Fernand where he was sitting on the window ledge, saw him look up frantically, rise as though with a convulsive start, then fall back onto his seat in the casement. At almost the same moment, a dull sound echoed through the stairway, a sound of heavy footsteps and confused voices, mingled with the clanking of weapons, which rose above the exclamations of the guests, loud though those were, and instantly attracted everybody's attention, creating an uneasy hush. The sounds drew closer. 3 knocks sounded on the door, and all those in the room looked at their neighbours in astonishment. "Open in the name of the law!" cried a voice in a resounding tone. No one answered. At once the door flew open, and a commissioner of police, wearing his sash, strode into the room, followed by 4 armed soldiers under the command of a corporal. Uneasiness gave way to terror. "What is wrong?" "What is wrong?" the ship-owner asked, going over to the commissioner, whom he knew. "Monsieur, there must undoubtedly be some mistake." "If there is a mistake, Monsieur Morel," the commissioner replied, you may be sure that it'll be soon put right. In the meanwhile, I have a warrant here, and though I do it with regret, I must fulfil my duty. Which of you gentlemen is Edmond Dantès?" All eyes turned towards the young man who, preserving his dignity despite his astonishment, stepped forward and said, "I am, monsieur. What do you want with me?" "Edmond Dantès," the commissioner said, "I arrest you in the name of the law." "Arrest me?" Edmond said, paling slightly. "Why are you arresting me?" "I have no idea of that, monsieur, but you will be informed of it in your first interrogation." Monsieur Morel realized that there was no sense in trying to argue in the circumstances. A commissioner wearing his sash is no longer a man, but a statue of the law, cold, deaf, and dumb. But the old man rushed over to the officer. It is impossible in some situations to reason with the heart of a parent. He begged and prayed. Prayers and tears were ineffectual, but his despair was so great that the commissioner was moved by it. My dear sir," he said, "calm yourself. Perhaps your son has forgotten some formality to do with the customs or the health authorities, and, as likely as not, when he has given them the information they require, he will be released."
"Well, I never! What does this mean?"
Caderousse asked Danglars quizzically, while Danglars feigned surprise.
"How can I tell?" he replied. "Like you, I can see what is happening, but I am at a loss to understand it."
Caderousse looked round for Fernand, but he had vanished. At that moment, the whole of the previous evening's events flashed before his eyes with terrifying clarity. It was as though the catastrophe had lifted the veil that drunkenness had cast over his memory of the day before.
"Oh! Oh!" he exclaimed hoarsely. "Can this be a consequence of the joke you were speaking about yesterday, Danglars? If that is the case, damnation take the perpetrator, for it is a cruel one."
"Nothing of the sort," muttered Danglars. "Far from it. You know very well that I tore up the paper."
"That you did not," said Caderousse. "You merely threw it into a corner."
"Hold your tongue. You were drunk. You saw nothing." "Where is Fernand?" Caderousse asked.
"How do I know?" replied Danglars.
"About his business, no doubt. But instead of worrying about that, why don't we go and comfort these poor people?" While this conversation was taking place, Dantès had in effect been shaking the hands of all his friends, with a smile to each, and relinquished himself into captivity, saying, "Stay calm. The mistake will doubtless be explained, and it is quite probable that I shall not even go as far as the prison." "Certainly not, I guarantee it," Danglars said, coming across at that moment to the group, as he had indicated. Dantès went down the stairs, following the commissioner of police, with the soldiers surrounding him. A carriage, its door wide open, was waiting outside. He got in. 2 soldiers and the commissioner got up behind him, the door closed, and the carriage set out on the road back to Marseille.
"Farewell, Dantès! Farewell, Edmond!"
cried Mercédès, leaning across the balustrade. The prisoner heard this last cry, wrung like a sob from his fiancée's tormented heart. He leant out of the carriage window and called, "Goodbye, Mercédès," as he disappeared round one corner of the Fort Saint-Nicolas. "Wait for me here," said the ship-owner. "I shall take the first carriage I can find. Hurry to Marseille and bring the news back to you." "Yes," everyone cried. "Go on and come quickly back." After this double departure, there was a dreadful moment of stunned silence among all who remained behind. For a time, the old man and Mercédès stayed apart, each immured in grief. But at length their eyes met. Each recognized the other as a victim stricken by the same blow, and they fell into each other's arms. Meanwhile, Fernand returned, poured himself a glass of water, drank it, and sat down on a chair. By chance, this happened to be next to the chair into which Mercédès sank when she parted from the old man's embrace. Fernand instinctively moved his own chair away. "He's the one," Caderousse told Danglars, not having taken his eyes off the Catalan.
"I doubt it," Danglars replied. "He was not clever enough.
In any case, let whoever is responsible take the blame."
"You are forgetting the person who advised him."
"Pah! If one were to be held to account for every remark one lets fall—"
"Yes, when it falls point downwards."
Everyone else, meanwhile, had been discussing every angle of Dantès' arrest.
"And you, Danglars?" someone asked. "What do you think about what's happened?"
"My view is that he must have brought back some packets of prohibited goods."
"But if that was the case, you should know about it, Danglars, since you were the ship's supercargo."
"That may be so, but the supercargo doesn't know about any goods unless they are declared to him. I know that we were carrying cotton, that's all, and that we took the cargo on at Alexandria from Monsieur Pastre and at Smyrna from Monsieur Pascal. Don't expect me to know anything more than that."
"Yes, I remember now,"
Dantès' poor father muttered, clutching at the straw.
"He told me yesterday that he had brought me a cask of coffee and one of tobacco."
"You see," said Danglars, "that's it. While we were away, the customs must have gone on board the Pharaon and discovered the contraband." Mercédès did not believe any of this, and having up to then contained her distress, she burst into a fit of sobbing. "Oh, come, come, don't lose hope," old Dantes said, though without really knowing what he was saying. "Hope?" Danglars repeated. "Hope," Fernand tried to mutter, but the words stuck in his throat. His lips trembled and no sound emerged from them. "Gentlemen," cried one of the guests, who had been keeping watch from the balcony. "Gentlemen, a carriage! Ah, it's Monsieur Morel. Come now, he must surely be bringing good news." Mercedes and the old man ran out to greet the shipowner, who met them at the door. Monsieur Morel's face was pale. "Well?" they all cried at once. "Well, my friends," the shipowner replied, shaking his head, "the matter is more serious than we thought." "But, monsieur," cried Mercedes, "he is innocent." I believe him to be so," Monsieur Morel replied, "but he is accused—" "What is he accused of?" old Dantes asked. "Of being an agent of Bonaparte." Those readers who lived through the period in which this story takes place will recall what a dreadful accusation it was that Monsieur Morel had just pronounced in those days. "So," Caderousse muttered, "you lied to me, Danglars. The trick was played after all. But I do not intend to let this old man and this young woman die of grief, and I shall tell them everything." "Hold your tongue, wretch!" Danglars exclaimed, grasping Caderousse's hand. "Otherwise I can't answer for what may happen to you. How do you know that Dantes is not in fact guilty? The ship did call in at the island of Elba. He landed there and stayed a day in Porto Ferrao. If he has been found with some compromising letter on his person, anyone who takes his part will look like an accomplice." Caderousse was rapidly informed of the full strength of this argument by the dictates of self-interest, and he looked at Danglars with an expression deadened by fear and grief. Having just taken one step forward, he proceeded to take two back. "So let's wait and see," he muttered. "Yes, we will wait," Danglars answered. "If he is innocent, he will be freed. If he is guilty, there is no sense in compromising oneself for the sake of a conspirator." "Let's go, then. I can't stay here any longer." "Yes, come on," said Danglars, delighted at having someone to accompany him out of the room. "Come, we shall let them extricate themselves as best they may." They left, and Fernand, resuming his former role in support of the young woman, took Mercedes's hand and led her back to Les Catalans. For their part, Dantes's friends took the old man in a state of near collapse back to the Allée des Mélins. The news that Dantes had just been arrested as a Bonapartist agent soon spread through Marseille. "Would you have believed it, my dear Danglars?" Monsieur Morel said, catching up with his supercargo and Caderousse, for he was also heading for town as fast he could to have some first-hand news of Edmond from the Crown Prosecutor, Monsieur de Villefort, who was a slight acquaintance of his. "Would you believe it?" "Well now, monsieur," Danglars replied, "I told you that Dantes put into Elba for no apparent reason, and that this call seemed suspicious to me." "But did you tell anyone else of your suspicions?" "I was careful not to do any such thing," Danglars assured him, lowering his voice. "You know very well that, on account of your uncle, Monsieur Policar Morel, who served under you-know-whom and makes no secret of his feelings, you are suspected of hankering after the old regime. I would have been afraid I might harm Dantes and also yourself. There are some things that a subordinate has a duty to tell the owner and to keep well hidden from everyone else." "Well done, Danglars, well done. You're a good fellow. I had already thought about you in the event of old poor Dantes becoming captain of the Pharaon." "How so, monsieur?" "Well, you see, I did ask Dantes what he thought of you, and if he would have any objection to my leaving you in your post. I don't know why, but I thought I had noticed some coldness between you." "And what was his reply?" "He told me that he did indeed feel that he had some grievance against you, though in circumstances that he would not explain, but that anyone who enjoyed the shipowner's confidence also had his own.
"Hypocrite,"
muttered Danglars.
"Poor Dantès," said Caderousse. "He was an excellent fellow, and that's a fact."
"Yes, but meanwhile," Monsieur Morel said, "the Pharaon has no captain." "Oh, we must hope," said Danglars, "that, since we cannot sail again for 3 months, Dantès will be freed before then."
"Of course, but in the meanwhile?"
"Well, Monsieur Morel, in the meantime, I am here. As you know, I can manage a ship as well as the first ocean-going captain who may come along. It may even benefit you to use me, because when Edmund comes out of prison you will not have to dismiss anybody. He will quite simply resume his post, and I mine."
"Oh, thank you, Danglars," said the ship-owner. "That arranges everything. I therefore authorize you to take command and supervise the unloading. Whatever disaster may befall an individual, business must not suffer."
"Have no fear, monsieur. But can we at least go and visit him? Poor Edmund."
"I'll let you know as soon as I can, Danglars. I shall try to speak to Monsieur de Villefort and intercede with him on the prisoner's behalf. I know that he is a rabid royalist, but, damn it, though he's a royalist and the Crown Prosecutor, he is also a man, and not, I believe, a wicked one."
"No," said Danglars, "though I have heard it said that he is ambitious, which is much the same."
"Well, we shall find out," Monsieur Morel said with a sigh. "Go on board and I'll join you there." He left the two friends to make his way towards the law courts.
"You see how things are turning out?" Danglars said to Caderousse. "Do you still want to go and speak for Dantès?"
"No, indeed not, but it is dreadful that a trick should have such dire consequences."
"Pah! Who played the trick? Not you or I. You know very well that I threw the paper into a corner. I even thought I had torn it up."
No, Caderousse insisted. "As far as that goes, I am certain. I can see it in the corner of the arbour, screwed up in a ball, and I wish it was still in the place where I saw it."
"What do you expect? Fernand must have picked it up, copied it, or had it copied. Perhaps he did not even take that trouble, which means... Good Lord! Suppose he sent my own letter."
"Luckily I disguised my handwriting." "But did you know that Dantès was a conspirator?"
"Did I know? I knew nothing at all. As I told you, I was making a joke, that's all. It seems that, like Harlequin, I spoke a true word in jest."
"No matter," said Caderousse. "I'd give a great deal for this not to have happened, or at least not to be involved in it. You wait and see, Danglars. It will bring us misfortune."
"If it brings misfortune, it will be to the guilty party, and the real responsibility lies with Fernand, not with us. What ill do you suppose could befall us? All we have to do is keep quiet and not breathe a word of this, and the storm will blow over without striking us."
"Amen," Caderousse said, waving goodbye to Danglars and making his way towards the Allée des Mélins, shaking his head and muttering to himself, as people are inclined to do when they have a good deal on their minds.
"Good!" Danglars exclaimed. "Everything is working out as I expected. I am now Captain Pro Tem, and, if only that idiot Caderousse can keep his mouth shut, Captain for good. So, the only other eventuality is that the law may release Dantès. Ah, well," he added with a smile, "the law is the law, and I am happy to put myself in her hands." Upon which he leapt into a boat and gave the boatman the order to row him out to the Pharaon, where the shipowner, as you will recall, had arranged to meet him. Chapter 6. The Deputy Crown Prosecutor. That same day, at the same time, in the Rue de Grandcourt, opposite the Fontaine des Méduses, a betrothal feast was also being celebrated, in one of those old buildings in the aristocratic style of the architect Puget. However, instead of the participants in this other scene being common people, sailors and soldiers, They belonged to the cream of Marseillais society. There were former magistrates who had resigned their appointments under the usurper, veteran officers who had left the army to serve under Condé, and young men brought up by families which were still uncertain about their security, despite the 4 or 5 substitutes that had been hired for them, out of hatred for the man whom 5 years of exile were to make a martyr, and 15 years of restoration a god. They were dining, and the conversation flowed back and forth, fired by every passion, those passions of the time that were still more terrible, ardent and bitter in the south, where, for 5 centuries, religious quarrels had seconded political ones. The emperor, king of the island of Elba after having been ruler of part of the world, exercising sovereignty over a population of 500 or 600 souls, when he had once heard the cry, "Long live Napoleon," from 120 million subjects in 10 different languages, was treated here as a man lost forever to France and to the throne. The magistrates picked on his political errors, the soldiers spoke of Moscow and Leipzig, the women discussed his divorce from Josephine. This royalist gathering, rejoicing and triumphing not in the fall of man, but in the annihilation of the idea, felt as though life was beginning again, and it was emerging from an unpleasant dream. An old man, decorated with the cross of Saint Louis, rose and invited his fellow guests to drink the health of King Louis XVIII. He was the Marquis de Saint-Mérin. At this toast, recalling both the exile of Hartwell and the king who had brought peace to France, there was a loud murmur. Glasses were raised in the English manner. The women unpinned their bouquets and strewed them over the tablecloth. There was something almost poetical in their fervour. "If they were here, they would be obliged to assent," said the Marquise de Saint-Mérin, a dry-eyed, thin-lipped woman with a bearing that was aristocratic and still elegant, despite her 15 years. "If they were here, all those revolutionaries who drove us out and whom we, in turn, are leaving alone to conspire at their ease in our old chateau, which they bought for a crust of bread during the Terror, they would be obliged to assent and acknowledge that the true dedication was on our side, since we adhered to a crumbling monarchy, while they, on the contrary, hailed the rising sun and made their fortune from it, while we were losing ours. They would acknowledge that our own king was truly Louis le Bien-Aimé, the well-beloved, while their usurper, for his part, was never more than Napoleon the Maudit, the accursed. Don't you agree, de Villefort?" What was that, Madame la Marquise? Excuse me, I was not following the conversation." Come, let these children be, Marquise," said the old man who had proposed the toast. "They are to be married, and, naturally enough, have other things to discuss besides politics." I beg your pardon, mother," said a lovely young woman with blonde hair and eyes of velvet, bathed in limpid pools. "I shall give you back Monsieur de Villefort, whose attention I had claimed for a moment. Monsieur, my mother is speaking to you." "I am waiting to answer Madame's question," said Monsieur de Villefort, "if she will be so good as to repeat it, because I did not catch it the first time." "You are forgiven, Renée," said the Marquise, with a tender smile that it was surprising to see radiate from those dry features. But the heart of a woman is such that, however arid it may become when the winds of prejudice and the demands of etiquette have blown across it, there always remains one corner that is radiant and fertile, the one that God has dedicated to maternal love. "You are forgiven. Now, what I was saying, Villefort, is that the Bonapartists had neither our conviction, nor our enthusiasm, nor our dedication." "Ah, madame, but they do at least have one thing that replaces all those, which is fanaticism. Napoleon is the Mohammed of the West. For all those masses of the common people, though with vast ambitions, he is not only a lawgiver and a ruler, but also a symbol, the symbol of equality." "Napoleon!" the Marquise exclaimed. "Napoleon, a symbol of equality? And what about Monsieur de Robespierre? It seems to me that you are appropriating his place and giving it to the Corsican. One usurpation is enough, surely." "No, madame. said Villefort. "I leave each of them on his own pedestal. Robespierre in the place Louis XV on his scaffold, and Napoleon in the place Vendôme on his column. The difference is that equality with the first was a levelling down, and with the second a raising up. One of them lowered kings to the level of the guillotine, the other lifted the people to the level of the throne. Which does not mean," Villefort added, laughing, "that they were not both vile revolutionaries, or that the 9th Thermidor and the 4th of April 1814 are not two fortunate dates in the history of France, and equally worthy to be celebrated by all friends of order and the monarchy. However, it does explain why, even now that he has fallen, I hope never to rise again, Napoleon still enjoys some support." "What do you expect, Marquise? Even Cromwell, who was not half the man that Napoleon used to be, had his followers." "Do you realize that there is a strong whiff of revolution in what you are saying, Villefort? But I forgive you. The son of a Girondin is bound to be tarred with the same brush." Villefort's face flushed a deep red. "It is true, madame, that my father was a Girondin, but he did not vote for the death of the king. He was proscribed by the same terror by which you yourself were proscribed, and narrowly escaped laying his head on the same scaffold as that on which your fathers fell." "Yes," the Marquise replied, this bloody recollection not having produced the slightest alteration in her expression. "But had they both stepped on it, it would have been as men inspired by diametrically opposed principles. The proof is that my family remained loyal to the princes in exile, while your father hastened to rally to the new regime. After citizen Nortier was a Girondin, Comte Nortier became a senator." Mother, said René, "you know we agreed that we should not mention these unfortunate matters again." "Madame," Villefort replied, "I join with Mademoiselle de Saint-Marin in humbly begging you to forget the past. What is the sense in recriminations about things over which the will of God itself is powerless? God can change the future. He cannot alter even an instant of the past. As for us, all we can do, since we are unable to repudiate it, is to draw a veil across it. Well, for my part, I have cut myself off not only from my father's opinions, but also from his name. My father was, and perhaps still is, a Bonapartist named Nortier. I am a royalist, and am called de Villefort. Let the last remnants of the revolutionary sap perish in the old stem, and see only the young shoot, madame, which grows away from the trunk, although it is unable, I might almost say unwilling, to break with it altogether." "Bravo, Villefort," said the Marquis. "Bravo! Well said. I, too, have always urged the Marquise to forget the past, but always in vain. I hope that you will be more successful." Yes, that is very well," the Marquise replied. "Let us forget the past. I ask nothing better. But let Villefort at least be unyielding for the future. Remember, Villefort, we have answered for you to His Majesty, and, on our insistence, His Majesty was willing to forget, just as," she offered him her hand, "I am, at your request. However, should any conspirator fall into your hands, remember that all eyes will be fixed upon you, the more so since it is known that you belong to such a family which might perhaps have dealings with these conspirators." "Alas, madame," Villefort exclaimed, "my office and most of all the times in which we live require me to be harsh. I shall be so. I have already had some political cases to deal with, and in that respect I have shown my mettle. Unfortunately, we are not finished yet." "You think so?" asked the Marquise. "I fear so. Napoleon is very close to France on the island of Elba, and his presence almost within sight of our coast sustains the hopes of his supporters. Marseille is full of officers on half-pay who daily seek quarrels with the royalists on some trivial pretext. This leads to duels among the upper classes and murders among the common people." "Yes," said the Comte de Salvieux, an old friend of Monsieur de Saint-Marin and chamberlain to the Comte d'Artois. "Yes, but as you know, he is being moved away by the Holy Alliance." We heard speak of this as we were leaving Paris, said Monsieur de Saint-Marin. Where is he being sent? To St. Helena.
St. Helena? What's that? Asked the Marquise.
An island lying 2,000 leagues from here, on the far side of the equator, the Comte replied. And about time. As Villefort says, it was a fine folly to leave such a man between Corsica, where he was born, and Naples, where his brother-in-law is still king, overlooking Italy, the country that he wanted to offer as a kingdom to his son.
Unfortunately, said Villefort, there are the treaties of 1814, and Napoleon cannot be touched without breaching them.
Why then, they shall be breached, said Monsieur de Salvieux.
Was he himself so scrupulous when it came to shooting the poor Duc d'Enghien?
Yes, the Marquise said. It's agreed. The Holy Alliance will cleanse Europe of Napoleon, and Villefort will cleanse Marseille of his supporters. Either the king reigns or he does not. If he does, his government must be strong and its agents unyielding. That is how we shall prevent wrongdoing.
Unfortunately, madame, Villefort said, smiling, a deputy prosecutor to the crown always arrives on the scene when the wrong has been done.
Then it is up to him to repair it.
To which I might again reply, madame, that we do not repair wrongs but avenge them, that is all.
Ah, Monsieur de Villefort, said a pretty young thing, the daughter of the Comte de Salvieux and a friend of Mademoiselle de Saint-Marin. Do please try to have a fine trial while we are in Marseille. I have never been to a court of assizes, and I am told it is most interesting. Most interesting indeed, mademoiselle, since it is a veritable drama, and not an invented tragedy, real sorrows in place of ones that are merely feigned. The man that you see there, instead of returning home once the curtain is lowered to dine with his family and go peacefully to bed before starting again the next day, is taken to a prison, there to meet his executioner. You may well understand that, for nervous people who wish to experience strong sensations, no spectacle can equal it. Don't worry, mademoiselle. If the opportunity arises, I shall present it to you. He makes us shudder, yet he is laughing, said Renée, going pale. What do you think? What did you think? It is a duel. I have already 5 or 6 times asked for the death penalty against those accused of political crimes or others. Well, who can tell how many daggers are at this very moment being sharpened in the shadows, or are already pointed at me? Heavens! Renée exclaimed, feeling increasingly faint. Are you really serious, Monsieur de Villefort? I could not be more serious, mademoiselle, the young magistrate said with a smile. And the situation can only get worse with these fine trials that the young lady requires to satisfy her curiosity, and which I require to satisfy my ambition. Do you imagine that all these soldiers of Napoleon's, who are accustomed to walk blindly in the direction of the enemy, pause to think before firing a shot or marching forward with fixed bayonets? And in that case, will they hesitate to kill a man whom they consider their personal foe any more than they would to kill a Russian, an Austrian, or a Hungarian whom they have never set eyes on? In any case, you understand, this is as it should be, because without it there would be no excuse for my profession. As for me, when I see a bright spark of hatred shining in the eye of an accused man, I feel encouraged. I rejoice. It is no longer a trial, but a duel. I go for him, he riposts. I press harder, and the fight ends like all fights in victory or defeat. That is what advocacy means. That is the risk run by eloquence. If a defendant were to smile at me after my speech, he would make me feel that I had spoken poorly, that what I had said was bland, inadequate, or lacking in vigour. Imagine the feeling of pride a Crown Prosecutor experiences when he is convinced of the defendant's guilt and sees the guilty man go pale and bend under the weight of his evidence and the blast of his oratory. The head is lowered, it will fall. Renée gave a little cry. "That's oratory for you," said one of the guests. "That's the man we need in times like these," said another. "And in your last case," a third remarked, "you were magnificent, my dear Villefort."
You know, that man who murdered his father? Well, you literally killed him before the executioner had laid a hand on him." "Ah, if it's a matter of parricide," René said, "then I'm not bothered. There is no torture bad enough for such men. But those unfortunate political prisoners, they are even worse, René, for the king is the father of the nation, so wishing to overthrow or kill the king is the same as wanting to kill the father of 32 million men." "Ah, but even so, Monsieur de Villefort," said René, "will you promise me to be indulgent towards those I commend to you?" "Have no fear," said Villefort with his most charming smile. "We shall prepare my speeches together." "My dearest," said the Marquise, "you look after your little birds, your spaniels and your ribbons, and let your fiancé get on with his work. Nowadays the sword has been put aside, and the gown is supreme. There is a wise Latin tag to that effect. Sedant arma togae," Villefort said with a bow. "I did not dare attempt it in Latin," the Marquise replied. "I think I should rather that you were a physician," René went on. "The exterminating angel may be an angel, but he has always terrified me." "My sweet," Villefort murmured, enfolding her in a loving glance. "Daughter," the Marquis said, "Monsieur de Villefort will be the moral and political physician of our region. Believe me, that is a fine part to play." "Which will serve to obliterate the memory of the one played by his father," added the incorrigible Marquise. "Madame," Villefort replied with a sad smile, "I have already had the honour of remarking to you that my father renounced the errors of his past, or at least I hope he did, and that he became an ardent friend of religion and order, perhaps a better royalist than I am myself, since he was fired by repentance, whilst I am fired only by passion." After which well-turned phrases, Villefort looked at the guests to judge the effect of his oratory, as he might have looked up from the court towards the public gallery at the end of a similar declaration. "Just so, my dear Villefort," said the Comte de Salvieux. "This is precisely what I replied to the minister of the king's household 2 days ago in the Tuileries, when he asked me how I might explain this singular union between the son of a Girondin and the daughter of an officer in Condé's army, and the minister fully understood. This policy of alliances is that of Louis XVIII. Hence the king, who had been listening to our conversation without our knowing it, interrupted us in the following terms. Villefort observed that the king did not pronounce the name of Noirtier, but on the contrary stressed that of Villefort. 'Villefort,' he said, 'has a bright future before him. He is a young man who is already mature, and one of us.' I was pleased to see that the Marquis and Marquise of Saint-Marin were taking him as their son-in-law, and I should have recommended the match to them if they had not themselves come to ask my permission for it." "The king told you that, Comte?" Villefort exclaimed with delight. "I give you his very words, and if the Marquis so wishes, he will frankly admit that what I am now telling you accords precisely with what the king told him when he himself spoke with his Majesty 6 months ago about the proposed marriage between you and his daughter." "That is true," said the Marquis. "Ah, but this means I owe everything to that worthy monarch. What would I not do to serve him?" "At last," said the Marquise, "that is what I want to hear. Let a conspirator come here now, and he will be welcome." "Speaking for myself, mother," said René, "I beg God that he does not listen to you, but sends Monsieur de Villefort only petty thieves, puny bankrupts, and faint-hearted swindlers. In that case I shall sleep easy." Villefort laughed. "That is as if you were to wish on the physician nothing but migraines, measles, and wasps' stings, only ailments that are skin-deep. If, on the contrary, you wish to see me as a crown prosecutor, you should wish on me those fearful illnesses that bring honour to the doctor who cures them." At this moment, as though chance had merely been waiting for Villefort to express the wish for it to be fulfilled, a valet entered and whispered something in his ear. Villefort excused himself and left the table, to return a few moments later with a smile and a delighted expression.
René responded with a look of love, for the young man was truly elegant and handsome like this, with his blue eyes, his smooth complexion, and the dark side whiskers framing his face, so that she felt her whole being was hanging on his lips, waiting for him to explain the reason for his brief disappearance. "Well, mademoiselle," said Villefort, "a moment ago you wished to have a physician for your husband. I have this at least in common with the disciples of Escapulus," they still spoke in such terms in 1815, "that my time is never my own, and I may be even interrupted when I am beside you celebrating our betrothal." "And for what reason were you interrupted, monsieur?" the young woman asked with slight misgiving. "Alas, for a patient who, if I am to believe what I am told, is at the last extremity. This time it is a serious case, and the illness is on the verge of the scaffold." "Heaven preserve us!" René cried, paling. "Truly!" the whole company exclaimed together. "It seems that a little Bonapartist conspiracy has been uncovered, nothing less." "Can that be?" said the Marquise. "Here is the letter of denunciation." And Villefort read, "The Crown Prosecutor is advised by a friend of the monarchy and the faith that one Edmond Dantès, first mate of the Pharaon, arriving this morning from Smyrna after putting in at Naples and Porto Ferrajo, was entrusted by Murat with a letter for the usurper, and by the usurper with a letter to the Bonapartist committee in Paris. Proof of his guilt will be found when he is arrested, since the letter will be discovered either on his person or at the house of his father or in his cabin on board the Pharaon." "But this letter," said René, "which is in any case anonymous, is addressed to the Crown Prosecutor and not to you." "Yes, but the Crown Prosecutor is away, and in his absence the missive reached his secretary, who is entitled to open his letters. He opened this one and sent for me. When he did not find me, he gave orders for the arrest." "So the guilty man has been arrested?" said the Marquise. "You mean the accused man?" said René. "Yes, madame," Villefort replied, "and as I have just had the honour to tell Mademoiselle René, if the letter in question is found, the patient is indeed sick." "Where is this unfortunate man?" René asked. "He is at my house." "Go, my friend," said the Marquis. "Do not neglect your duty by staying with us. When the king's service demands your presence elsewhere, go where duty requires you." "Oh, Monsieur de Villefort," René said, clasping her hands together, "have pity. This is the day of your betrothal." Villefort walked round the table, and coming to the girl's chair, rested his hand on the back of it and said, "I should do whatever I could to spare you any anxiety, dear René, but if the evidence is correct, if the accusation is true, then this Bonapartist weed must be cut down." René shuddered at the word cut, for the weed that was to be cut down had a head. "Pah!" said the Marquise. "Don't listen to this little girl, Villefort. She will get used to the idea." And she offered him a dry hand, which he kissed, while giving René a look that said, "This is your hand that I am kissing, or at least that I should like to be kissing." Here is an ill omen," René murmured. "Mademoiselle," said the Marquise, "your childness is truly exasperating. What, may I ask, can the destiny of the state have to do with your sentimental fantasies and the mawkish movements of your heart?" "Oh, mother," René murmured. "Be indulgent with her lack of royalist zeal, Madame de la Marquise," said de Villefort. "I promise that I shall do my duty as the Crown Prosecutor's deputy conscientiously. That is to say, I shall be utterly pitiless." But even as the magistrate was addressing these words to the Marquise, the fiancé was surreptitiously giving his betrothed a look that said, "Have no fear, René. For the sake of our love I shall be merciful." René replied to that look with her sweetest smile, and Villefort went out with heaven in his heart. Chapter 7. The Interrogation. Hardly had de Villefort left the dining-room than he put off his joyful mask to take on the serious mien of one called upon to exercise the supreme office of pronouncing on the life of his fellow man. However, despite the mobility of his expression, something which the deputy had studied more than once, as a skilled actor does in front of his mirror, on this occasion it was an effort for him to lower his brow and darken his features. In reality, apart from the memory of his father's choice of political allegiance, which, if he did not himself completely renounce it, might affect his own career, Gérard de Villefort was at that moment as happy as it is possible for a man to be. At the age of 26, already wealthy in his own right, he held a high office in the legal profession, and he was to marry a beautiful young woman whom he loved, not with passion, but reasonably, as a deputy crown prosecutor may love. Apart from her beauty, which was exceptional, his fiancée, Mademoiselle de Saint-Mérin, belonged to a family which was among those most highly thought of at court in this time, and besides the influence of her mother and father, who, having no other children, could reserve it entirely for their son-in-law, she was in addition bringing her husband a dowry of 50,000 écus, which, thanks to her expectations, that dreadful word invented by marriage brokers, might one day be increased by a legacy of 500,000. Hence, the addition of all these elements amounted for Villefort to a dazzling sum of felicity, to such an extent that he thought he was seeing sunspots when he turned the eyes of his soul for any length of time on the contemplation of his inner life. At the door he found the police commissioner waiting for him. The sight of this sombre personage immediately brought him back from seventh heaven to the solid earth on which we all walk. He composed his features, as we mentioned, and approached the officer of the law. "Here I am, monsieur. I have read the letter, and you did well to arrest this man. Now, tell me everything you know about him and the conspiracy." "As far as the conspiracy is concerned, monsieur, we know nothing as yet. All the papers that we seized on him have been tied in a single bundle and deposited sealed on your desk. As for the detainee, you know from the letter denouncing him that he is one Edmond Dantès, first mate on board the three-master Pharaon, trading in cotton with Alexandria and Smyrna, and belonging to the house of Morel and Son of Marseille." "Did he serve in the navy before joining the merchant marine?" "No, monsieur, he is quite a young man." "How old?" 19, 20 at most." At this moment, as Villefort was going down the Grande Rue and had reached the corner of the Rue des Conseils, a man who seemed to have been waiting there for him came over. It was Monsieur Morel. "Ah, Monsieur de Villefort!" the good man exclaimed. "I am so pleased to see you. Can you imagine? The strangest, the most unheard-of mistake has been made. They have just arrested the first mate of my ship, Edmond Dantès." "I know, monsieur," said Villefort. "I have come to question him." My good sir," said Monsieur Morel, carried away by his friendship for the young man, "you do not know the person who is being accused, but I know him. He is the mildest, most honest man you could imagine. I might almost say the man who knows his job best of any in the merchant marine. Monsieur de Villefort, I commend him to you most sincerely and with all my heart." As we have seen, Villefort belonged to the nobility of the town, and Monsieur Morel to the plebeian part of it. The former was an extreme royalist, the latter suspected of harbouring Bonapartist sympathies. Villefort looked contemptuously at Morel and answered coldly, "You know, monsieur, that one can be mild in one's private life, honest in one's business dealings, and skilled in one's work, yet at the same time, politically speaking, be guilty of great crimes. You do know that, I suppose, monsieur." He emphasized these last words, as if intending to apply them to the shipowner himself, while his inquiring look seemed to search right into the innermost soul of a man who had tried to intervene on behalf of another, when he should have realized that he himself was in need of indulgence. Morel blushed, for his conscience was not altogether clear on the point of his political opinions. In any case, his mind was slightly troubled by the confidential information that Dantès had given him about his talk with the marshal and the few words that the emperor had addressed to him. However, he added in tones of the most urgent pleading, "I beg you, Monsieur de Villefort, be just, as it is your duty to be, and generous as you always are, and soon restore poor Dante to us." This "restore to us" had a revolutionary ring to the ears of the Crown Prosecutor's deputy. "Well, well," he muttered to himself, "to us. Can this Dantès be a member of some sect of Carbonari?" For his protector to employ that collective expression without being aware that he was doing so. I seem to understand from the commissioner that he was arrested in a cabaret, and he added in a large gathering. This was some kind of vaunt. Then, in reply, he said aloud, "Monsieur, you may rest entirely assured, and you will have not appealed to me in vain if the détenu is innocent. But if, on the contrary, he is guilty, we live in difficult times, monsieur, when impunity would be the worst of examples. I shall thus be obliged to do my duty." Upon that, having arrived at the door of his house, which backed onto the law courts, he stepped majestically inside, after giving an icy bow to the unhappy shipowner, who remained as if rooted to the spot where Villefort had left him. The anteroom was full of gendarmes and police officers, and in the midst of them, under close arrest, surrounded by faces burning with hatred, the prisoner stood, calm and motionless. Villefort crossed the anteroom, gave a sidelong glance in the direction of Dantès, and, taking a dossier that was handed to him by one of the officers, vanished, saying, "Let the prisoner be brought in." Swift though it was, the glance had been enough to give Villefort an idea of the man whom he would have to question. He had recognized intelligence in that broad forehead, courage in that firm eye and knitted brow, and candour in those full lips, half parted to reveal two rows of teeth as white as ivory. First impressions had been favourable to Dantès, but Villefort had often heard it said, as a profound political maxim, that one must beware of first impulses, even when they were correct, and he applied this rule on impulses to his impressions, without taking account of the difference between the two terms. He thus stifled the good instinct that was attempting to invade his heart and from there to attack his mind, settled his features in front of the mirror into their grandest expression, and sat down, dark and threatening, behind his desk. A moment later, Dantès entered. The young man was still pale, but calm and smiling. He greeted his judge in a simple but courteous manner, and looked around for somewhere to sit, as though he had been in the shipowner Monsieur Morel's drawing-room. It was only then that he met Villefort's dull gaze, that look peculiar to men of the law who do not want anyone to read their thoughts, and so make their eyes into unpolished glass. The look reminded him that he was standing before justice, a figure of grim aspect and manners. "Who are you, and what's your name?" Villefort asked, leafing through the notes that the officer had given him as he came in, and which, in the past hour, had already become a voluminous pile, so quickly does the mound of reports and information build up around that unfortunate body known as détenus. "My name is Edmond Dantès, monsieur," the young man replied in a calm voice and ringing tones. "I am first mate on board the vessel Pharaon, belonging to Messrs. Morel and Son." "Your age?" Villefort continued. 19. "What were you doing at the time of your arrest?" "I was celebrating my betrothal, monsieur," Dantès said, his voice faltering slightly, so sharp was the contrast between those moments of happiness and the dismal formalities in which he was now taking part. And so much did the sombre face of Monsieur de Villefort enhance the brilliance of Mercedes's features. "You were at your betrothal feast?" said the deputy, shuddering in spite of himself. "Yes, monsieur. I am about to marry a woman whom I have loved for the past 3 years." Though usually impassive, nevertheless Villefort was struck by this coincidence, and the emotion in the voice of Dantès, whose happiness had been interrupted, sounded a sympathetic chord with him. He too was to be married, he too was happy, and his own felicity had been disturbed so that he might help to destroy that of a man who, like himself, was on the very brink of happiness. This philosophical analogy, he thought, would cause a great stir when he returned to Monsieur de Saint-Marin's salon, and while Dantès waited for his next question, he was already mentally ordering the antitheses around which orators construct those sentences designed to elicit applause, but which sometimes produce the illusion of true eloquence. When he had worked out his little interior discourse, Villefort smiled at the effect of it, and returned to Dantès. "Continue, monsieur." "How do you wish me to continue?" "In such a way as to enlighten justice." "Let justice tell me on which points it wishes to be enlightened, and I shall tell it all that I know. However," he added, smiling in his turn, "I must warn it that I know very little." "Did you serve under the usurper?" "I was about to be enrolled in the navy when he fell." "Your political opinions are reported to be extreme," said Villefort, who had not heard a word about this, but was not averse to putting the question in the form of an accusation. "My political opinions, monsieur? Alas, I am almost ashamed to admit it, but I have never had what you might call an opinion. I am barely 19, as I had the honour to tell you. I know nothing and am not destined to play any public role. The little that I am and shall be if I gain the position to which I aspire, I owe to Monsieur Morrel. So all my opinions, I would not say political, but private opinions, are confined to three feelings. I love my father, I respect Monsieur Morrel, and I adore Mercédès. That, monsieur, is all I can tell justice. You see that there is little to interest it there." While Dantès was speaking, Villefort examined his face, at once so mild and so frank, and recalled the words of Renée, who, without knowing the prisoner, had begged indulgence for him. The deputy already had some acquaintance with crime and with criminals, so in every word that Dantès spoke, he saw proof of his innocence. This young man, one might even say this child, plain, unaffected, eloquent with the heartfelt eloquence that is never found by those who seek it, full of affection for everyone, because he was happy, and happiness makes even wicked men good, was so effectively spreading the warmth that overflowed from his heart that the accuser himself was not immune to it. Rough and stern though Villefort had been towards him, Edmond's look, tone, and gestures expressed nothing but kindness and goodwill towards his interrogator. "By heaven," Villefort thought, "this is a charming young man, and I hope I shall not have great difficulty in putting myself on the right side of Renée by carrying out the first request that she has made of me. It should earn me a warm clasp of the hand in front of everyone, and a delightful kiss in a more secluded corner." This pleasurable expectation lit up Villefort's face, so that, when he turned away from his thoughts and back to Dantès, the latter, who had been following his every movement across the judge's face, reflected his thoughts in a smile. "Monsieur," said Villefort, "do you know of any enemies you may have?" "Enemies?" said Dantès. "I am fortunate enough to be too unimportant to have any. As to temperament, I may perhaps be a trifle quick-tempered, but I have always tried to restrain it towards my subordinates. I have 10 or a dozen sailors under my orders. Let them be questioned, monsieur, and they will tell you that they like and respect me, not as a father, I'm too young for that, but as an elder brother." "But if you have no enemies, you may have inspired envy? You are about to be made captain at the age of 19, which is a distinction for someone of your class. You are about to marry a pretty girl who loves you, which is a rare fortune for someone of any class at all. Fortune having favoured you in these ways, you may have aroused jealousy." "Yes, you are right. You must know human nature better than I do, and what you say is possible. But I confess that if these envious men were to be among my friends, I should rather not know who they are, so as not to be obliged to hate them." "You are wrong, monsieur. One must always see clearly how one stands as far as possible, and frankly you seem to me such a worthy young man that in your case I am going to depart from the normal procedure and help you to throw light on this by showing you the denunciation that has led to your being brought here. This is the accusing letter. Do you recognize the writing?" Villefort took the letter from his pocket and offered it to Dantès, who examined it. His face clouded, and he said, "No, monsieur, I do not know this handwriting. It is disguised, yet it has an appearance of sincerity. In any case, the writing is that of an educated hand." He looked at Villefort with gratitude. "I am happy to find myself dealing with a man such as you, because my rival is indeed a true enemy." From the flash that passed through the young man's eyes as he spoke those words, Villefort was able to perceive how much violent energy was hidden behind his mild exterior. "Come then," said the deputy prosecutor, "answer my questions honestly, not as an accused man to his judge, but as one wrongly accused might answer another who has his interests at heart. How much truth is there in this anonymous accusation?" And Villefort threw the letter, which Dantès had just given back to him, onto the desk with a gesture of distaste. "Everything and nothing, monsieur, that is the absolute truth, on my honour as a sailor, on my love for Mercédès, and on my father's life." "Carry on," Villefort said, adding under his breath, "If Renée could see me, I hope she would be pleased and no longer call me an executioner." "When we left Naples, Captain Leclerc fell ill of a brain fever. As we had no doctor on board ship, and because of his haste to reach Elba, he did not want to drop anchor at any point along the coast. His illness worsened until, after 3 days, realizing that he was dying, he called to see me. 'My dear Dantès,' he said, 'swear on your honour to do what I ask of you. This is a matter of the highest importance.' I swore to do as he asked. 'Very well. As second in command, responsibility for the vessel will fall on you after my death, so I wish you to take command, set course for Elba, disembark at Porto Ferrajo, ask for the marshal and give him this letter. It may be that you will be given another letter and told to carry out some mission. That mission which I should have accomplished, Dantès, you will perform in my stead, and the honour shall be yours.' I shall do it, Captain, but it may be more difficult than you think for me to see the marshal." "Here is a ring," the captain said. "Make sure that he gets it, and all barriers will be removed." On this, he gave me a ring. It was none too soon. 2 hours later, he lapsed into a delirium, and on the next day he died. "Then what did you do?" "What I had to do, monsieur, and what anyone would have done in my place. In all events, a dying man's wishes are sacred, but to a sailor the wishes of a superior officer are orders which must be carried out. So I set sail for Elba, arriving there the next day, when I confined everyone to the ship and disembarked alone. As I had foreseen, there was some difficulty in gaining an audience with the marshal, but I sent him the ring which was to serve as a token for me, and all doors were opened. He received me, questioned me on the circumstances of poor Leclerc's last hours, and, as the captain had predicted, gave me a letter, which he told me to take in person to Paris. I promised to do so, since these were my captain's final wishes. I made land and quickly settled everything that had to be done on board. Then I went to see my fiancée, whom I found more lovely and more loving than ever. Thanks to Monsieur Morel, we were able to circumvent all the formalities of the church, and at last, as I told you, monsieur, I was celebrating my betrothal. I was to be married in an hour and expected to leave for Paris tomorrow, when I was arrested on the basis of this denunciation that you seem to despise as much as I do." Yes, Villefort muttered. "I am convinced by your story, and if you are guilty, it is only of imprudence. Even that is excused by your captain's order. Let me have the letter that was entrusted to you on Elba. Give me your word that you will appear at the first summons, and you can rejoin your friends." "So I am free to go?" Dantès exclaimed. "Yes, provided you give me the letter." "It must be in front of you, monsieur, because it was taken with my other papers, some of which I recognize in that bundle." "Wait," the lawyer told Dantès, who was picking up his hat and gloves. "To whom was it addressed?" To Monsieur Notier, Rue Coqueron in Paris. If a bolt of lightning had struck Villefort, it could not have done so with greater suddenness or surprise. He fell back into the chair from which he had half risen to reach over to the bundle of papers that had been taken from Dantès, and hastily going through them, drew out the fatal letter, on which he cast a look of unspeakable terror. Monsieur Notier, Rue Coqueron, number 13, he muttered, the colour draining from his face. Yes, monsieur, Dantès replied in astonishment. Do you know him? No, Villefort answered emphatically. A faithful servant of the king does not know conspirators. Is this a matter of conspiracy, then? Dantès asked, starting to feel even greater anxiety than before, having just thought he would be free. In any event, monsieur, as I told you, I had no idea what was in the dispatch that I carried. Perhaps not, Villefort said grimly, but you did know the name of the person to whom it was addressed. In order for me to give it to him myself, monsieur, I had to know his name. And you have not shown this letter to anyone? Villefort asked, reading and growing paler as he read. To no one, monsieur, on my honour. Nobody knows that you were the bearer of a letter from Elba addressed to Monsieur Noirtier? Nobody, monsieur, except the person who gave it to me. That is one too many, even so, Villefort muttered, his brow clouding as he read towards the end. His pale lips, trembling hands, and burning eyes excited the most painful anxiety in Dantès' mind. After reading, Villefort put his head in his hands and stayed like that for an instant, overcome. Heavens, monsieur, what is it? Dantès asked fearfully. Villefort did not reply, but remained like that for a short time. Then he looked up, with pale and troubled features, and read the letter once more. You say that you have no idea what's in this letter? He asked. I repeat on my honour, monsieur, said Dantès, that I do not know. But for goodness sake, what is wrong with you? You must be feeling unwell. Would you like me to ring? Would you like me to call someone? Certainly not, said Villefort, rising abruptly. Don't move or say a word. I am the one who gives orders here, not you. Monsieur, Dantès said, hurt. I wanted to help you, that's all. I don't need any help. I felt dizzy for a moment, nothing more. Look to yourself, not to me. Answer me. Dantès was expecting this request to be followed by further questioning, but none came. Villefort slumped into his chair, passed an icy hand across a brow dripping with sweat, and began for the third time to read the letter. Oh, if he does know what's in this letter, he thought, and if he should ever learn that Noirtier is Villefort's father, I am lost utterly. From time to time he glanced at Edmond, as if his look might pierce the invisible barrier that holds secrets in the heart so that they do not pass the lips. Ah, let there be no further doubt, he exclaimed suddenly. But in heaven's name, monsieur, the unfortunate young man cried, if your doubts are on my score, if you suspect me, then question me, I am ready to answer you. Villefort made a violent effort to control himself, and said, in a voice that he tried to keep firm, Monsieur, your interrogation has brought up the most serious charges against you, so I am no longer able, as I first hoped, to set you free immediately. Before I can take that step, I must consult the examining magistrates. Meanwhile, you have seen how I have treated you. Oh, yes, monsieur, Dantès exclaimed, and I thank you because you have been more of a friend to me than a judge. Well, I must keep you prisoner for a little while longer, but for as short a time as I can. The main charge against you is the existence of this letter, and you see... Villefort went over to the fireplace, threw the letter into the fire, and waited until it was reduced to ashes. And you see, I have destroyed it. Monsieur, Dantès exclaimed, you are more than justice, you are goodness itself. But listen to me, Villefort continued. After seeing me do that, you realize that you can trust me, don't you? Order me, monsieur, and I shall obey you. No, Villefort said, coming across to the young man. No, I shall not give you any orders, you understand? I shall give you some advice. do so, and I shall follow it through as though it were an order. I am going to keep you until evening, here, at the Palais de Justice. Someone else may come and question you. Tell him everything you told me, but do not say a word about the letter." "I promise not to, monsieur." It seemed as though it was Villefort who was begging, and the prisoner who was reassuring his judge. "You understand?" he went on, looking towards the ashes which still retained the shape of the paper. "Now that the letter has been destroyed, only you and I know that it ever existed. You will never see it again, so deny it if anyone mentions it to you. Deny it boldly, and you will be saved." "Have no fear, monsieur, I shall deny it," Dantès said. "Good, good," Villefort exclaimed, reaching for a bell pull. Then he stopped as he was about to ring, and said, "Was that the only letter that you had?" "The only one." "Swear to me." Dantès held out his hand. "I swear." Villefort rang, and the police commissioner came in. Villefort went up to the officer and whispered a few words in his ear. The commissioner answered with a nod. "Follow this gentleman," Villefort told Dantès. Dantès bowed, gave Villefort one last look of gratitude, and went out. No sooner had the door shut behind him than the strength drained out of Villefort's body, and he fell, almost unconscious, into a chair. Then, after a moment, he muttered, "Oh, my lord, on what slender threads do life and fortune hang! If the Crown Prosecutor had been in Marseille, or if the examining magistrate had been called in my place, I should have been lost. That paper, that accursed piece of paper, would have plunged me into the abyss. Father, will you always be an obstacle to my happiness in this world, and shall I always have to contend with your past?" Then, suddenly, it seemed as though a light had unexpectedly passed through his mind and lit up his face. A smile rose to his still clenched lips, while his distraught look became a stare, and his mind appeared to concentrate on a single idea. "That's it," he said. "This letter, which should have destroyed me, might perhaps make my fortune. Come, Villefort, to work." After making sure that the prisoner was no longer in the antechamber, the deputy prosecutor also went out, and began to make his way briskly towards his fiancée's house. And that is where... Oops, I shall punch the microphone, yes. That is where I shall end it for tonight.